Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. I'm going to do a community service announcement in a moment. I have to do I'm going to talk about the beginning of this video. At least is going to feature the Trump and Elon Musk hilariously disastrous interview on so many levels, right? But first, obviously, the stuff to keep my channel going. There's a membership program, which is probably the biggest way to help keep the channel going, because at some point I'm going to have to go to a paid service because YouTube ads are just not cutting it anymore. And this is not just me, it's many people. Subscribing, resubscribing, liking the video, commenting. You can just leave an emoji. Like, all you have to do is hit an emoji, right? Anyone, doesn't matter which one, right? And so, any kind of way of letting YouTube know that you're still interested in the videos, recommending the videos to family and friends, all these things, right? So that's how you can, if you are benefiting from this channel and you like to keep it going, then that's what you have to do. Bookmarking it in case they stop recommending it to you or notifying you or whatever. Double notified, and you'll click the bell, whatever it is. But I've talked about this before, the whole shadow ban, the whole thing, in every video now. So the community service announcement is this. See, I have a freedom here, a way that I can be of service. Like, this is doing service to you all. Like, if you're a Trumper or you're a Kamala Harris supporter, you're a voter, just a voter in general. And, depending on your level of passion and, how much your psychological, your hope, I don't know how to put it, how much of your energy goes into believing Trump's going to make America great again, or whatever it might be, that somehow these people are going to save you. Like, how much of your energy goes into doing that? Well, you're a complete dumbass. And I can say that because I'm not saying it to you personally. Like, I don't know you personally. Like, it's harder to say something to a friend or family member. It might come out when you get angry, and that's no good. When you're frustrated and you're trying to convince them. But I can say it completely dispassionately that you're a complete dumbass. And not, again, I don't know you personally. I'm not talking to you personally. But you can receive it that way. And instead of getting mad at me, which is the weakest, most, immature, most, pathetic way to go about it, because it's how you process truth. Like, you can hear a truth from me as a dispassionate, not knowing you, not talking to you personally, but like, you can hear it that way. The second master of the Sage-Mark system, this guy Boby, lived in pretty much what we would consider abject poverty. He was a babu or a clerk. And people would come to see him and stay at his house. And he'd feed them and, like, whatever, with, meager amount, like, very, very wide, this dal, if you have an Indian dal, which is a lentil, watery dal with a, chapati, which is like like a tortilla. And, just, it wasn't very much, but it was all that, like, he had to offer people. Like, he'd stay at his house and he would, and he would hold court. He would smoke his hookah. He had like a tobacco pipe that had jaggery, which is a form of Indian sugar, and, like, charcoal and tobacco. And, like, he barely ate himself. Like, sometimes he'd have like one meal a day. He had an ulcer. And he would sit there, smoke the hookah, and he would be, these people would have these blissful experiences just by being in his presence. And there were times he would see something in somebody, and he would, he wouldn't say, "All right, look, you piece of boop," he wouldn't confront him directly and say, "Hey, you need to change this. This is a character flaw. Like, you're not going to progress spiritually if you, but these people are coming to him for, that type of thing, right? I mean, there's spiritual cleaning, but they also have to have some self-awareness. To advance spiritually, you have to be aware of your flaws and fix them, right? But he, knew that it wouldn't work if, he confronted people directly. Like, we all know that, right? You guys all experience that. That someone in your life is being a dumbass, and you go and you try to talk to them about it. and you know for sure that they were doing to make a mistake. And it turns out you're right at the end, and they make the mistake anyway. We've had that in our life. People. We have someone now, my wife and I, who has turbo cancer, right? Because of more than likely getting multiple, roosters, all those things, rooster, 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 getting the boop and all that, right? But not being able to talk to people or talking to them and then not listening to you, and you're just trying to help them, and they just don't want to be helped, and they get pissed off at you. And working as I have a master's in counseling and working as a counselor, and all these things. I'm well aware of this. You just can't tell people this is your problem, even if they come to you asking, "Hey, can you tell me what my problem is?" And you go, "Yeah, this is your problem." They just can't hear it, right? So what Babaji would do was he would look at somebody else and talk to them about something they talk about that problem to somebody else. Like there'd be a circle of people, and he would talk to person B about a problem that person A had. He wouldn't look at person A directly because, he was hoping that they would hear it and they'd realize, hey, that's me. I got to change it, right? And so, that's the way you have to deal with people. You can't directly confront them on their dumbassery, right? And so this is a community service for you guys. When I do a comment video, it's not going to help the commenter because the commenter is pretty much an arrogant, I mean, I doubt there's been any commenters who have benefited from me explaining how they suck, right? But it helps the rest of you. Like, if you realize, oh, yeah, I do that too. And you're not being directly, called on it, but you realize, right? And so, this is that kind of community service. And so the first part of this is, do you think that people in power, people who wield power, would ever give any of that power to Kamala Harris or Donald Trump? Do you think they would do that? Do you think that would happen? I mean, just be honest. Do you think that anybody in their right mind would give power to that dingbat Kamala Harris or that completely arrogant bonehead Donald Trump? Donald Trump is stupid. He is stupid, right? Do you think anybody in their right mind would give them power? Donald Trump acknowledged this in a tweet. So this is a tweet from December 9th, 2020. One of my favorite things Donald Trump did. And so he wrote, if someone cheated in an election, which Democrats did, why wouldn't the election be immediately overturned? How can a country be run like this? And so if you're a Trumper, Donald Trump admitted that they didn't give him any power at all. He said, how can a country be run like this? This is the president of the United States. And so that as a president, he could do nothing to stop the Democrats from stealing the election. And whether they cheated on the votes or not, which, is debatable because, they don't really have to. They rigged it by, number one, Donald Trump could do nothing he was looking at an easy, kind of sure in re-election, right? Going into the summer, he was facing a guy who was already senile then, who couldn't campaign. They already knew that the guy had Parkinson's, and they nominated him anyway. And so going into the summer, Donald Trump had a good economy, a records low jobs number, and it was a false economy. And I explained this before. He deregulated everything. It wasn't the economy can't be good, but it was, it looked like it was good. And everything was going great for him to get reelected, right? And a lot of the fears that people had of a Trump presidency being some sort of an epic disaster were over because he had been president for 4 years and the country was not any better or worse off than before. And so, it was like an uptick in the economy and these things, right? But they rolled out COVID and he had nothing, he could have said things about it, but he couldn't stop it, right? They rolled out COVID and he got worked completely on it. Do you guys remember the time when Trump he wouldn't wear a mask and they made him wear a mask? And then, of course, he did Operation Warp Speed, which was a disaster. And they got him to close down the economy, which completely screwed him later on, right? Because they ran against this bad economy that was created by COVID. and they blamed Trump for the economy, and they forced him into closing everything down, right? Trump didn't want to close everything down, and no one in the right mind would. But he did it, and it was unnecessary, and people kind of knew it was the Democrats, but still they blamed it on Trump. Because that's what a president is. They are a fall guy. They are a shield for the people who really run the system. There's someone for you to blame. That's what politicians are. For someone for you to say, to think that they're the ones making the decision. And that you have some power over that person with your vote. That's how the system works. They don't give these people any real power. If somebody cheated in the election, which the Democrats did, why wouldn't this election be immediately overturned? How can a country be run like this, right? So he can't help you. He can't save you. He couldn't save himself, right? And then the way he acted after that, and the way he brought all those people up to D.C. and then the whole big event in January. And then all the criminal cases, they could have thrown him in jail anytime. They could have sentenced him and prosecuted him. I said, he's their asset. They're not going to throw their asset in jail, right? They're not going to throw their primary asset in jail. And so he has no real power. He's admitted it in so many different ways when he whines to you about how he's being mistreated and being prosecuted. And, oh, I didn't go after Hillary because she's part of the club and we just don't do that. But when it came to me, they went after me, right? Because he's not even in on it. Like, that's the thing. I mean, he was certainly in on the fake shooting thing. But other than that, I don't think he's in on. He's aware of the stuff that's going on. I think he's just being played and used in things. And they got complete control over the guy, right? Even if he had power, even if he had presidential power, we have checks and balances in this system, which is a great idea. And, there's money power and there's religious power and there's, all these agencies of power. And, kings had to deal with that. Kings had to deal with the people around them, the other so-called royalty, the people that, the dukes and like if it's the kings of England and things like this. And sometimes things just happen. Like there's a famine and the people go nuts, right? The people go, full mob. Or, things happen. Even to kings and emperors, right? They're powerless. They get cancer, they get sick, they get heart disease, loved ones die. There's a plague. I mean, it's just, you don't have control over things. The illusion of power. Yes, and the more power you get, the more helpless you become. Like it's like an invertendo thing. The more power you have, alleged power you have, the more that you become helpless to that power and you wielding it and things like this. And so there's nothing there that can be done. And this idea that they could do something is a joke. Nobody would give Trump or Kamala Harris power. And so you're a complete dope if you believe that they're going to change things and this has some sort of effect. I mean, after all the stuff that you've seen as a truther, and you believe in some kind of thing like the deep state or some, whatever it is, right? Like, there was a little clip I saw yesterday from the Daily Show, not funny, talking about the Elon Musk-Trump interview. And it showed Laura Trump saying that the deep state created the interview, right? I mean, created the glitches in the interview. But Elon Musk, one of the richest men in the world, he bought Twitter and his wealth, and he became not the richest man in the world. They went after him, right? Like even with all his alleged power. And they, even though he's doing what they want him to do, because he's he's an asset, he's like a CIA asset or something. And he, a fake truther, a fake, whatever, Republican now. But the guy couldn't put on a show where he's talking to another guy. I mean, everyone who has ability for a Zoom call or any of these things, right? My wife was saying that nobody was watching, so they glitched it out because they weren't getting enough views. But they had all these fake views because they're claiming 1 billion views, which is silly. Like, we'll get into that. Well, I already talked about that in my last video. And so, he's incapable, right? They can't control anything. You could be you have wealth and you have the ability of having some power and things that you could buy people with your money. You can make people do things based on paying them off, right? That's money power. And you have that influence on people. But even with that influence, it's not enough, right? Is it going to stop you from getting cancer? Is it going to stop you from dying? These are going to stop the things that are going to happen that make you feel powerless just like every frickin' buddy else, right? And so there's no, with all the things that weather control and climate control in your home and cars and planes and, all these things, monster machines that we have. And, if nature wants, if the divine plan wants to destroy America, America's toast. And if we want to destroy America, America's toast. People have like on a soul level, on a subconscious level, a desire to destroy this country. And, it's your soul has had enough of it, right? You're going in the wrong direction. And so you can't stop what's going to happen. And believing in these, the political process is just a waste of time. And I don't care. Like, I'm just, this is what I get paid to do, right? This is my interpretation of my job, is to say the things that, people aren't going to be able to hear from their relatives and all these things. If you're a MAGA person, you're destroying relationships with your family over some guy who's just a complete bonehead and clearly a flim-flam man, and he's telling you in every possible way. And you still believe, right? Because of your desperation and your, not being able to face the, the truth of our circumstances, that there's no saving this system. Whatever's going to happen, whatever your lifestyle is going to look like, whatever the structure is going to look like in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, is completely out of your control and everybody else's. Nobody can stop what's about to happen, right? And no one's going to, everyone, if anybody had any real power like that, then people would live forever, right? If you had any real control over anything, you wouldn't die. Like, the first thing you would do is you say, I'm not going to die ever, right? People would get suicidal after a while. They would, want to die. They would want to leave. I mean, they have this thing, if you ever saw those, were they called the Outlander? It was called the Outlander. These guys who just live forever. And they would get married, and they would marry, a young woman, and before you know it, she'd be old. And they would have kids that they were outliving, right, all the time. If you didn't have the ability to die, but everyone else was dying, it would be completely lonely. You'd have like this trust and abandonment kind of, it would just be horrible. All the time, people that you loved would be dying all around you, right? And you'd be doing the same thing over and over again. Like, you would just, at some point, you want to get out of the planet. You'd enjoy everything. You'd indulge in everything. These rich people are miserable. They're indulging. They're going to the best places and doing the best things. And they're still miserable. Like, it just doesn't stimulate them anymore. Pleasure is not in itself a goal. Happiness is not a goal that has anything to do with why you're here. It's not your true goal or purpose to be, for pleasure and happiness. Yeah, you seek it. You desire pleasure, and you want to push away pain. That's natural. But it's not why you're here. But in all that, you're going to die, and there's no stopping it. Like, if people had power, they would stop that, right? They prolong it, yeah, sure. They freeze their heads and bodies in cryogenics, thinking that they could, be revived, but their soul isn't coming back. You don't even have power over your soul's decision, right? Your soul isn't going to reincarnate in some frozen frickin' body it left years ago. You're not going to, once you die, and like your soul goes somewhere. And it doesn't, it's not slave to your ego anymore for that period of time where it's not here on planet Earth. And so it's not going to go back to something that, was already left behind years ago. And so this idea of control that I call these controllers is not even a real thing. And so you're a fool to believe in the system, because it's obviously a very pivotal time in our existence. And you can be doing something. And I'm not, here to tell you what you should do, but you could figure it out. Like, you can connect with your soul. You can connect with the divinity within you. And you can figure out why you're here and what you need to do. Like, each person has the ability to do that, right? And the gratefulness meditation that I do is helpful in people doing that, right? But in itself, it isn't, the end all, because, I've talked about all the people who do heartfulness that are following a cult leader. They have the inability, after years of being spiritual people, to make the right decision. It's painful for you to watch. But so even if you have a relationship with the divinity within you, you still have to, build your character and hone your skills and learn how to make good decisions, right? Like we all go through dumb periods. Like there was a time where I just made bad decisions, when I was younger, and I mean just one bad decision after another. It was my whole life was a dumb decision. Like, how I was living and who I was as a person. And so, we all go through that. Like there's times where you're being a dummy. And if you're lucky, you have somebody like me that comes along, tells you it, or lets you know in some capacity. And you're able to get out of, or maybe not even a person, it's just your circumstances. You run into enough walls and you realize, all right, I got to stop walking into walls. I got to stop being such a dummy, right? I got to open my eyes and wake up and, stop sleepwalking through life or whatever. And so, if you're a Trumper, that's what you're doing right now. I mean, there's very few people who are Kamala supporters that watch my channel. But if you're, engaging with the system with any sense that, this can be saved and you're putting your energy into something, your money, your time, your energy, where, wasting time is like your biggest, like, sin, right? You have time here on planet Earth and you're wasting it. Doing what, right? What are you doing? Following this frickin' moron that obviously is, well, again, to the interview here. Well, like you're the opposite of a woke person. If you think Trump is a savior or even a potential savior or even has any power or has your best interest at heart or any of the things, even the slightest, tint of any of that stuff, you're wasting your time and you're being a complete dumbass. All right, so let's get into the interview here. Okay, so let's pick it up here in the beginning of I played some of this for you. This is where Elon Musk is gushing praise on Trump for faking a shot to the ear. And we know that at the very least, I mean, we know it's fake. Like most of us know it's fake, the whole thing. But, but one thing that nobody really can deny, I mean, they will deny it, but they can't, is that he put a bigger bandage on than he needed. He had a bandage that covered his whole ear when he came out because he couldn't acknowledge the smallness of the cut. His doctor said it was 2 centimeters, which is smaller than an inch, but we know there's nothing there at all. And his doctor said that there was no need for any stitches, right? And so all these things that we know, that it's just completely fake and exaggerated. Like if it was real, it was exaggerated. And it wasn't real. And so Trump is going to confront, like he's going to give 2 different stories. Like this is what happens when Trump gets in front of a mic. He can't help himself. And he just wanders around blathering about things where he confronts himself. He can contradict, not confronts himself. He contradicts his own story. And so let's get into it here.
Maybe we could start off with, the assassination attempt, which was an incredible thing. And I have to say that, your actions after that assassination attempt were inspiring. You, instead of shying away from things, instead of ducking down, you were pumping your fist in the air and saying, fight, fight, fight. And I think that's, I mean,
stupid. That would be stupid, right? It's not brave. It's stupid, right? And you're supposed to do something. Like, remember when you were a kid and they trained you in your school for fire drills? And, when I grew up, I really didn't get much of this, but people had to train them. The kids were trained in case of a nuclear bomb went off, right? Because of the Cold War with Russia. And that kind of was, that was dying out when I was a kid. But you go through training, and it's what's best for everybody. And certainly the Secret Service. And, Trump keeping his head down would have been what's best for everyone, right? But him pumping his fist in the WWF, this fake WWE stupid thing, was just classic. I mean, it was a classically fake event. Also, Trump being Trump. It wasn't real, but it wasn't the right thing to do. It wasn't courageous. He wasn't being a badass. It wasn't any of these things, right? Because it wasn't, it's not what's best for everyone, right? If he's the guy who's supposed to save the world and make America great again and prevent all these things, then him taking this unnecessary risk is stupid, especially at his age, right? You don't take these kind of risks because of, bravado or any of these things. But it was fake, and Trump isn't that guy. Like, Trump is definitely protective of his life and his physicality. He's not one of those risk takers. It's just something that, was so staged that it was obvious, but Elon Musk won't admit it.
The president of the United States represents America, and I think that is America. That is strength under fire. And
It's so bad.
so that's a big part of the reason why I was excited to endorse you as the president of the United States for having another term here is that was just incredibly inspiring. But I mean, what was it like for you?
Not pleasant, I
It's
have to
not
be honest.
pleasant.
I said there
Yeah.
was blood. I had
Being
more
shot is
blood.
not much fun.
I didn't know I had that much blood. The
I
doc
mean, they sprayed ketchup all over my ear. This was Bandaidgate and Ketchupgate, 101, and it gets bad. The whole thing, like, this is, I mean, let's just go into it here.
doctors later told me that the ear is a place that is a very bloody place if you're going to get hit. But in this case, it was probably the best alternative you could even think about because it went at the right angle, and it was a hard hit. It was very, I guess you would say surreal, but it wasn't surreal.
A hard hit. I mean, getting shot is something that very few people can experience, right? But getting shot where a bullet enters into your body somewhere and either exits out of the other side is not the same as getting grazed, right? So he got grazed, right? Like, so, and he didn't get grazed, but the official story is that he got grazed. It's in so much that he didn't need stitches, and that's the big part. The fact that he didn't need stitches, and there's no evidence that his ear is even damaged at all. There's no scar. There's no anything, right? There's nothing there that they can even show you. You can see the pictures. And so, like, what is he talking about? Like, you got grazed, bro, right? You got grazed. And so, like he's saying, it's a hard hit. Well, what does that even mean? Like, you didn't take a direct shot anywhere. The most that you could say is you got grazed. Your official story, your official doctor, who's obviously lying on your behalf or maximizing, exaggerating your injuries, he said that there's a non-existent cut there, right?
I was telling somebody you have instances like this or like a lot less than this where you feel it's a surreal situation. And I never felt that way. I knew immediately that it was a bullet. I knew immediately that it was at the ear,
Yeah.
and because it hit very hard, but hit the ear. And I also heard people shout, "Bullets, bullets!" Get down, because I moved
Bullets. You heard people shouting bullets. That's what people are shouting bullets. Hey, they're bullets. Everybody, bullets. Everybody, look out for the bullets. Like, it's your. What are you talking about? Like, no one says that. Nobody said bullets, right? You know, it's bullets, you guys. There are bullets out there hitting ears. There's bullets grazing ears everywhere out here, you guys.
moved down pretty nicely, pretty quickly, and we had bullets flying right over my head after I went down. So I'm glad I went down. The bigger miracle was that I was looking in the exact direction of the shooter, and so it hit me at an angle that was far less destructive than any other
So
angle.
he's going to get into the whole angle, which I have explained. Well, I'll show you the pictures because I pulled up this. I have a video where I went into this in depth. But the shooter had to be in a direct straight line, in a perfect perpendicular line to Trump. Like I told you, like if you can do an experiment, if you put a string ear level up against, between two opposing walls, it's a straight line. And if you turn your head slightly either way, it's going to either hit the back of your skull or it's going to go through the front of your skull before hitting your ear, right? So the person has to be perpendicular with Trump, which wasn't possible because Trump was, you can see he's pointing to this chart, this chart of immigration, which he's going to talk about for quite a bit. He's going to get into immigration too with this thing. And there was no way for the shooter to be in that direction, right? And so, he is going to blow this whole story up too. He's going to talk about this being a miracle and all these things with, divine intervention and, God. He's going to bring God into it, which we talk about so much, and divine providence. But it was something that's not physically possible. It violates the laws of physics based in where the shooter was. Because the shooter was in front of Trump, on his right side, in front of Trump. And, it wasn't possible for the guy to curve the bullet around Trump's monster head in his face and hit his ear. The bullet would have had to curve to do that, right? And we know that there's no damage to his ear, so the whole thing's, so there's no miracle shot here. There's nothing there. But Trump goes on about this for, quite some time here.
So that was the miracle. That was
Yeah.
for those
Split
people that
second.
don't believe in God. I think we got to all start thinking about that. You have to, I'm a believer now. I'm more of a believer, I think, and a lot of people have said that to me. A lot of great people have said that to me, actually. But it was amazing that I happened to be turned just at that perfect
Yeah.
angle, and all because I put down a chart on immigration that showed that the numbers were so great. I love that chart
I
even
mean,
more
maybe it's
now
a
that I
sign.
ever.
Maybe
Yeah,
that's a
it's
sign,
it's an immigration sign.
You
But
highlighted a serious issue, and
yeah,
at that moment,
that's right.
the bullet missed your, hit your ear, but missed your head.
So Elon's implying that Trump was talking about immigration. And so because of that, the guy missed him, right? Um, it's just like silly. Like God cares about immigration. Now Trump's going to go on for a while. Like I said, he's later going to blow up this whole story. He's going to go off on a tangent about how the guy rushed his shot. That's why he missed him. Like he's going to literally say this after he goes into this and talks about divine providence and miracles. And he's talking about here. Well, let's go a little bit further here.
The
Yeah.
amazing thing is that the sign. I said, bring down that sign on immigration, and it was literally about an eighth of a second where it would be good, and after that it was going to
Yeah.
be a disaster, no matter which way you were facing. But it just had that perfect angle, which was
Yeah.
exactly at this shooter. Very sad situation. Such a sad situation. As you know, we lost somebody that was great, Corey,
Yeah.
who, a firefighter, a great gentleman, a great trumper. He was just a fantastic family and a fantastic
So
man.
if you're claiming God and divine providence here, then why wouldn't God protect everybody, right? Like, why was your life so much more valuable? And why would this be, I mean, all of these things.
And a friend of mine came up, Elon, and said, "I'd like to give the family some kind of help." And I said, "That's great." He said, "Do you mind?" I said, "I don't mind at all." And he wrote out a check for $1 million, gave it to the wife, and you know, she said, "This is really nice, but I'd rather have my husband back," which is a nice thing for
Sure.
somebody to say. To be honest, she's great.
What? To be honest, that's a nice thing for someone to say. What are you talking about?
The family is great, and we raised a lot of
Yeah.
money for them and for two other gentlemen are unbelievable people. Also, they were hit really badly. They thought they were not going to make it, and they did. The doctors in the Butler area, I tell you, they were incredible. They saved the two, and they were really hit tough, both of them
Yeah.
equally. And we thought
Yeah.
my first question was because I heard bullets flying over me. I said, "How many people were killed?" Because we had a massive
You heard
crowd.
them. You heard them flying over him. You heard the bullets flying over him. You can't hear them, right? You hear the gunfire. It's quite loud. But, like, you don't hear the bullets. You hear them whizzing over his head.
Out there, a tremendous
Yeah.
thousands and thousands of people, and there was no land. I mean, it was all people. So I said, "How many people have been killed?" Because I knew there were other shots being fired, and
Sure.
and they said, we don't know yet, but some people have been badly hurt. And I have to give the Secret Service sniper, they call him, or sharpshooter, but sniper,
Yeah.
because he didn't know there was a problem. He's a
Okay, so the story we heard, and if you understand what happens with these events, that they come out with stories, like there's news stories, and if something's a psychological operation run by the intelligence community, they have information packets they release to the media, and the media just goes with it. But then there'll be people speaking up about it that are there, and there'll be organic event coverage and things that doesn't add up with the package, right? And so they'll release the package of data, and each day it's something different, right? They'll release the name of the guy, and then they'll find the guy's motivation, a manifesto, and it's just what they do, right? There's this like stuff that they do if it's controlled. And, even if it's an organic event, they do the same thing. Like they tell the media, they have a story and they put the information out, right? But one of the things that they said was that the guy had a rangefinder, which is it would measure the distance. They're saying that like people are saying, oh, this is an easy shot. And I saw a guy who was an ex-sniper, and he was like, this is an easy shot. But he'd like to see the kind of optics the guy had, which we'll get into. Well, let me just say this here. So I watched this video yesterday because they talk about the guy's rifle, but they haven't shown any pictures. And they haven't released information of what kind of scope he has. You can have a laser pointer, which has, there's a dot that you see. And the bullet, if because you have to adjust your scope. Like when you get a gun, you have to adjust the sights and the scope to see if it's going where the sights are saying that it's going. So your scope, right? So like it might be off. So you have to adjust. There's ways to adjust the scope and the sights, and also you have to calculate for wind. And this guy said that the bullet would go faster in the summer. This guy was an ex Navy SEAL sniper or something, and that the temperature for this particular weapon has an effect on the bullet, right? And so he said might be why he missed, but then they're saying he didn't miss. So this is all going to be talked about here with Trump and Elon as well, right? But there's no evidence that the guy had a scope. He was using the gun sight, so it's quite a long shot. And so he had this rangefinder to see how far Trump was from his location. And he was walking around with it, and they identified him hours before. If somebody's walking around an event like this with a political figure with a rangefinder, you'd immediately stop the guy for questioning. But they didn't do that, and then they lost track of him. But the sniper picked him up later using the rangefinder and trying to, set his sights for the shot against Trump. But then Trump's going to talk about this guy distracting him later, which we'll get into then when he does that. Somebody coming up on the roof and the guy pointing his gun at the cop that crawled up on the roof, which means he no longer had Trump locked into his sights, which we'll get into in a bit, right? But the snipers knew about this guy for at least 10 minutes before the shot. He was up on the roof, and they saw him, and they put him in his sights. They could have taken him out any time before that. And Trump even acknowledged that in interviews, right? And so this isn't something that you praise the guy for.
an extraordinary shot, obviously, and he didn't know there was a problem. And he was able to pick it all out within 5 seconds. And he used one bullet from very far away, I guess probably about 400 yards. The shooter was 130, but he was on the opposite side of the field and the podium.
Okay, so there's varying way. Like he's saying that this was some incredible shot by the counter sniper. If you see them, this guy has an extensive scope, right? Like he has a powerful scope, and they have rifles, sniper rifles that are designed for, accuracies for long distance. And he's like praising this guy for taking the guy out in one shot. But here's the problem with all this stuff, because Trump's going to praise the rest of the Secret Service here. that the majority of Trumpers and Elon Musk, he's claiming that the hacking that they experienced, like there's no, they're going to have glitches throughout. There's going to be times where you're not going to be able to hear what they're saying, which is completely fucked up when, this is supposed to be a technological genius that's making these, high-priced electric vehicles, and he's running Twitter, and they can't even have a video feed. Like they've taken this back to radio, and they can't even get that done, right? And he's claiming that they're being hacked by foreign entities that want to stop this from happening or something or other, right? But there's a belief amongst Trumpers that this was some sort of conspiracy that was a deep state type of situation, right? Deep state conspiracy. And Trump isn't acknowledging that at all. He just praises the Secret Service, who they failed to clear their roof. They failed to take the guy out ahead of time. This all could have been prevented if they were doing their job. The sniper failed. The police field failed. They failed to, the sniper had one location to look at in terms of like people in the crowd, right? But, that is whatever it is. And there's two snipers. And that rooftop, the only access they had to the stage in terms of shooting Trump was from the rooftop. And they saw a guy up there, and they didn't do anything about it. And so there's multiple failures there. But the failures afterwards, where Trump's big head was exposed when they didn't know if there was more than one sniper, which if it was a conspiracy, there would have been, right? More than likely. And so all these people believe this is some deep state conspiracy. And Trump, who has a big, giant mouth and can't, he's always putting out conspiracy theories that are bogus, right? He says things all the time. He hasn't said that once, right? And so, like him saying, fight, 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 what, against some crazy kid? This isn't about you being taken down by the media or being taken down by the establishment. There's some crazy kid who was a registered Republican, and they've disappeared the kid from the story. Like they're not ever finding his manifesto, which, would usually be some CIA created thing. I mean, this is a patsy, and they're not even going into the guy's motivation. What's his motivation? What's his motivation, political, or why did he do it, right? And so the whole thing is silly, right? Like the whole idea that Trump there's the deep state conspiracy, and Trump isn't calling it that. Oh, they tried to take me out. Like he didn't say that at all. He has nothing but praise for Secret Service, which had an epic fail, and then all the other things here.
And he saw the smoke and the flame from the gun, immediately recognized it, and immediately took a shot. And it was one.
He had him in his sights the whole time. Like that's already been acknowledged. That the guy, he didn't see a guy on the roof. He's got a scope. You can see him with your eyes without people were pointing him out and whatever. He didn't see the guy? Of course he did. The guy was up there with a rangefinder, and the guy had him in his scopes, and he decided not to take a shot. You even said that. And so, like, he saw the guy with a gun. Like, you could see, you don't think you could see the guy was 130 meters away, and the guy, had a gun, and he saw him through the scope, right? And so your story doesn't add up. This story is like complete bullshit, right?
Perfect shot from very far away. And if he didn't do that, Elon, he would have. I mean, if he would have, a lot more people could have been badly hurt and killed. So I have to take my hat off to him, because that's also a surreal. He's been with them for 23 years, and he's never had anything like this. And all of a sudden he has to act. And it's a very tough thing to act and to be shooting somebody. But he saw the...
You mean he's never killed anybody? They got snipers up there that don't have experience with killing somebody. Like they've been doing this forever, but they haven't taken a shot. Like that's not good. You don't want this guy getting, getting cold fever, like getting deer fever or whatever. Like
he saw the gun, saw the smoke, saw the flame from the gun. Very far away. Obviously has very good eyes. He's got very good vision, which I assume you have to have in that particular.
He's got a spotter. This guy, there's a 2-person team, which you can see from multiple pictures. So there's 4 people up there. He's got a spotter. They're calculating for the wind. They have, this is a team of professional snipers, and they have scopes and they can see the guy. And they both would have seen the guy because they're facing the roof. The only place where somebody could take a shot like this, a clean shot, like the rooftop was their only worry, and they should have cleared it, which again, it's bogus. And he had the guy in his sights. Like he didn't just put the guy in his sights after the guy started firing. Oh, that guy with a gun on the roof, he did end up firing the shots at Trump. We never figured he was just hunting pigeons, but now we know.
Work, but he took
Absolutely.
aim very quickly, and they say it was approximately 5 seconds from long range,
Yeah.
one bullet. If that didn't happen,
Yeah.
because the shooter had a lot of bullets, he had a lot of.
He had lots of bullets. They were flying everywhere. Okay, so let me just take a break here and not take a break, but let's talk about what we're seeing here. And I'm going to show you some of the images I have from this previous videos that I made about this, the shooting. But in my thesis to this video, in my thesis statement, in the beginning of this video, the introduction, where I talk about how these people are powerless, right? Billionaires are powerless, kings are powerless, right? So these are supposed to be two powerful men, two billionaires telling you what's up, right? They're supposed to be the resistance. These are two guys who are extraordinarily successful with the beastly system, and they both have risen to wealth and power and influence, right? And here they are disseminating information, trying to save America for you guys, and going rogue and talking truth to power. And they're like I said, the resistance. And one of the guys was the former president, who I read his tweet about how he was powerless to stop all these things, who's now saying that he needed God to save him from a 20-year-old kid, a disgruntled 20-year-old kid with questionable marksmanship skills, who was able to get a clean headshot at a sitting president while the Secret Service sniper and all these people watched this kid walk around the grounds with a rangefinder, only to crawl up on a roof that was the only place that the two sniper teams had to really worry about a shot being fired at the former president. And they had the guy in his sights and chose not to shoot him. And the guy got off a number of shots in a 7-second period and grazed the former president's ear. And without God's help in terms of getting Trump to choose to do the chart at a different time, because he usually did it at the end of the presentation, the end of the rally, at the end of the speech. And he turned at that exact moment, and all the things that went into that Trump said, all these things that were anomalies that usually wouldn't have happened, that's what needed to happen for Trump to be able to avoid this 20-year-old kid's bullet, right? That's the official story that Trump is endorsing. And so I've pointed out a bunch of mistakes that Trump has made in the story that don't jive with facts. Of course, all the stuff with the year, all these things, right? And we'll keep on doing that. And each time I do that, remember that this is a guy who's supposed to have access to more information than we have, right? He's supposed to be, as the president and former president now, as a former president and when he was president, as a billionaire, he's supposed to have access to data and a worldview and people where he will know things that you don't have access to, that you and I aren't able to get. We're not privy to that information. Elon Musk as well, right? It's why you guys listen to me, right? Because, I do this full time as a job, and I look into these things. I don't have access to the kind of information they have, but I have a spiritual connection that they don't have. I have a connection with divinity, which I cultivate through meditation and, dyslexia and pattern recognition and certain things in my personality type that make me good at this, right? And how many times have I been right because of the, configuration of my worldview and the way that I disseminate information, I receive information and process it, right? But that's why you guys come listen here. Most of you, because of, you're doing a full-time job, or you're younger and you're not in you don't have the kind of, life experience I've had, or whatever it might be. and the abilities that I have, right? That's why you listen to people who you listen to pundits and experts and things to formulate your own opinion and to get information from them. And so you're listening to these two guys as supposed to be powerful insiders. They're supposed to be smart and successful men, right? We're going to tell you what's up, but they get all this stuff wrong. And they start off with the shooting, but Elon Musk can't even get a video feed here, video interview with Trump. Like, people are doing this every day. Like, independent people, people like me are having Zoom calls and things like that, right? And they can't get that done here. Like, they can't, they can't get this thing done. Elon Musk can't, with all his technological advancement and all these things with his cars and all this. He was the richest man in the world at some point, and they can't put on a quality, glitch-free show here. Starts 40 minutes too late, all these things. And then they go into this completely bogus story in which, Trump is, like I said, going to contradict his own beliefs in this thing, right? And as he develops it, we'll get more into it. But let me, go over to some of these images here that I had, and let's go through this. So this is my video entitled, "If You're Not Willing to Consider That Ketchupgate Might Be Fake, You're Not a Truther, You're a Sheeple." Which, it speaks for itself. Oh, the other thing is that Trump has gone bankrupt 6 times, right? He's somebody who uses the bankruptcy court. And, it's not a great thing to do. You're not taking responsibility you're defaulting on your debts, right? And you're taking chances, borrowing money, risk money, where, there we go, some of these images here. So here's the lack of blood, right? No blood on his collar, no blood on these things here. Let's just go through these images. But you're not, again, no blood anywhere here. So, you're not, taking responsibility for your actions. And then you can borrow money and take risks, knowing that if things go badly for you, you can just default on your obligations. Now, for an individual person who gets themselves into credit card debt and, has issues, again, it's not a great thing to do spiritually, karmically, whatever you want to call it, in terms of samskaras, which I talk about quite often. But also just, being like a stand-up person and taking responsibility for your choices. But if you're somebody who's an individual person who makes some bad decisions and, whatever it is, it's a lot more understandable than when you're a billionaire. Because when you default on your credit card debt to Goldman Sachs and some of these companies like this, it's not great. But those companies suck and are evil and they're screwing people over. And, it's not as bad as when you're a billionaire. And some of the things you're defaulting on is payments to small businesses and vendors and things like that, right? And so Trump is, the taxpayers. When you default on these things, there are people that suffer, right? People lose their jobs, people lose their businesses, and Trump has done this 6 times. And he wasn't able to, and I'm sure he doesn't want to do that. He wants all these bets to be successful, but they're not, right? So this is that guy. He's that guy, right? He's the kind of guy who does things like that, right? He'll lie to you and he, will screw people over. And there's this big giant maxi pad he put on, which we know is a lie because there's nothing there, right? There was nothing there to cover up. So here he is pointing. So you can see from this angle, he's pointing a little bit behind him. The chart is just behind him, which would mean a straight shot, because when I showed you this in the video, that he's about, this is when the bullet's about to be fired here. Got these 2 dueling giant cursors here. And he's, the gun's about to go off. And he's pointing behind him. So the shooter would have to be slightly behind him to get a straight angle on this shot here, right? And so the other thing is that from where the shooter is, even after Trump gets down, the guy still could be shooting at Trump's massive body. And once he lays down, if he's getting more shots off, like he could, the shots would be going into here, not whizzing over his head, right? He would, even if there's people on top of him, he could be firing into the pile, knowing where Trump's body was at, like hit him somewhere. And so there's that. But here's this incredible miracle shot that Trump called it. And it's going in a way where it could only be, it's very singular in terms of its being able to nick his ear, right? So the shooter, here's where Trump is pointing up here, right? Trump's pointing up here. Let me stop that other cursor. We have three different cursors, three big giant cursors. This is where they're saying the shooter was, right? And so behind him is where he's pointing. So the shooter couldn't be over here because there's no building. There's no place access point. So that doesn't exist. That miracle shot doesn't exist, right? Like Trump would have to be at an angle straight towards the shooter for him to be able to miss his giant dome and only nick his ear. But he's not there, right? So here you see the stage where Trump is at. And here's the shooter. And there's no way that the shooter could be over here where Trump would be, and would have access. These snipers are looking right here. There's a sniper team right here that has full access to the shooter, right? And so, that's all. They have a shorter shot to the shooter than he has to Trump, and they have a team and they have a better scope. Like here's another example of this, right? So you have the two snipers. Here's the stage. Trump keeps on saying that the snipers had a long shot and it's longer, but it's shorter. So the snipers, this is the sniper team that hits them. They're looking right at this. This is the only area around there where the guy would have, somebody would have a shot at Trump, right? And so this building over here is blocked by trees. It's farther away. And so again, like the guy, there's no acknowledgement of having a scope or sight. And the Navy SEAL sniper who has killed people that's talking about the shot and why potentially there's some issues with it wants to know what type of scope he has, right? What kind of optics he's using, because, that's everything when you're talking about 130 yards away, right? That's significant distance. You can't see that with your naked eye. So you'd have to have a good scope, and we haven't seen that the guy didn't have a scope, right? It seemed like what everyone's saying, or the pictures of the gun, there was just the sights that came with it, which would make the shot pretty much impossible. But there's so many factors here, so many changing stories as Trump goes through this. It seems like it was an impossible shot from the get-go. So here's the cut. Let's go back to the cut here. Now, the blood is dry. This is him getting up, and he's just getting up again. His head is exposed here. If somebody is taking these photos, that means somebody could take a shot if they were at the right angle for this thing. But they allowed him to do this, which means they failed in their job, and Trump is failing at cooperating with the Secret Service. But there's no indication of anything here. There's no active bleeding. I mean, there's no drips of blood here, no blood on his coat or any of these things. It's like they poured something on his face, and it dried by the time he got up, and that was it. Like, because, they didn't do anything to address the wound, right? And so when you have something that's an open cut, I was talking about how, shortly after this, I was out doing some farm work, and I was putting in, I was doing irrigation for some fruit trees that we had, and my hand slipped, and I was trying to push the irrigation tube on like some kind of a valve, and my hand slipped, and it hit the valve, and it cut open my finger. And I wanted to keep on working because I was, a little bit far away from the house, and I didn't have access to any Band-Aids. My wife had just talked about how there's forever chemicals in Band-Aids. So we were thinking about, well, what are we going to do? How are we going to, deal with small cuts and things like this? But the blood was just gushing out, right? And it wasn't a bad cut. It was, a small cut, but the blood kept on coming, and it wouldn't stop on its own. So I had to go up and wrap it in a paper towel and then go back and I put some tape on it. And eventually it stopped bleeding. But it bled for 5 to 6 minutes, whatever it was, till I, did all that. Because I had to do something to stop it from bleeding, right? And they didn't do anything. They didn't address his wound at all, and yet it's no longer bleeding. And so then he's going to show up here with this thing on. Like, that's a deception because he didn't need to go to the hospital. He didn't need stitches. They didn't need to do anything. It had already stopped the bleeding. So all they had to do was clean out the wound or whatever it was, and make sure it doesn't get infected. But it was again, it was a barely like a scratch. There's no scar tissue or anything. We know from this image here, like this is after he's taken the bandage off. There was no reason for a bandage, right? There's nothing. Like like at most he was grazed by the thing, and so I mean, there was no look about it. It's silly. The whole thing's just an absolute hoax and joke. I mean, as soon as he showed up with this, you're like, what the fuck, right? And so it's over. Like he's been exposed. So now he's going to go through this interview with Elon Musk, and they're making a big deal about this thing. Elon Musk, they talk about it for a good like 25 minutes or so, and they keep on going back to it. And Trump contradicts his story over and over again.
That's clearly he was very competent in taking that shot to stop the attempted assassination.
Again, calling it assassination would imply that it's a foreign government or a power behind it. This is a random person, right? This is some guy who's disgruntled or whatever, mentally ill. Again, with minimal marksmanship ability. He's an amateur. He's not a professional assassin. Nobody's paying for this. And there's no one else involved, right? And so the official story is that there is a lone gunman, a kid who we don't even know his motivation. He donated to Democrats, but he's a registered Republican. There was no online posting about this, no manifesto, nothing indicating the guy's intentions. There's nothing about it, right? His rifle, when they found him on the roof, again, there's all this information that comes out, and then there's conflicting stories, was like 5 or 6 feet away from him. He didn't throw his gun after being shot, right? And so, like, this guy is the ultimate patsy. Neither one of these guys are claiming that, right? And the reason why Trump has to keep on praising the Secret Service, which he's going to do again here, he's praised the Secret Service over and over again, is he knows it's all bullshit, right? And so he can't criticize them for something that, at some point they would just come out and say, this is fake, right? I mean, there's always that option. There's always that possibility. And so Trump can't come out and say this is some deep state attack on him and these things, which would be in his best interest. To rally the base to say that Joe Biden, these people did this on purpose and there was some sort of conspiracy behind it. And Trump isn't shy to do such things. Like, he talks about that pretty much every time he goes out. There's some sort of conspiracy to lock him up, to put him in jail, to cheat him out of his election, all these things. He's big on conspiracy theories, often the ones that are bogus, right? But he's not afraid to find something on the internet and then talk about it. But he hasn't done that once with the shooting. All he's done is praise the Secret Service. I'm going to get into it here.
But I mean, there does seem to be, some pretty significant failings elsewhere in the system. Like, there's just no way that, like, how on earth does a shooter get on a roof 130 yards away? That seems crazy. I think most people people are wondering how on earth could such a thing happen.
Well, I view it as two ways. There should have been nobody on the roof. There were people,
Yeah.
because there were so many tens of thousands of people there. There were people that were seeing him, and there was one woman with a red shirt and
Right.
Trump all over it,
I saw the video.
and she's screaming, "That guy's got a gun!" You saw it probably.
Yeah.
There's a
No, I
guy
saw
up
the
there
video.
with a gun.
I mean, it's like I guess, I mean, for my part, and I think probably many members of the public are wondering how the heck are, basically people wondering by it, pointing out there's a guy on the roof with a gun.
Yeah.
And they're seeing it, but somehow it's
Okay, if Trump was killed, and of course, according to the official story, there's one guy dead and 2 guys were shot. So there should be almost like criminal charges, manslaughter, against the failure here. I mean, this is epic failure. Like, if this was, if you do something on a corporate level where there's this kind of casualties and this kind of incompetence, you can be charged with manslaughter. And the job of the Secret Service is to prevent this sort of thing. the police, right? And I know the Secret Service director fell on her sword, but there isn't enough blame to go around here. Even Morning Joe, no one hates Trump more than Morning Joe. And I showed you this clip in one of my videos. Joe Scarborough was saying that Trump's head being exposed for, basically a, minute and a half or so while he's walking to his car and pumping his fists and doing all that shit he was doing. There's no way they should allow that to happen. Like, there's massive incompetence across the board. They didn't clear a roof. There's one roof that they had to clear, but even if they didn't clear it, they had snipers there, and all they had to do was look at the roof and say, all right, we can hit this guy here, right? And so, they didn't do that, right? And the guy was up there for a while. And so there was multiple ways to prevent this thing, and they didn't do it. And this is as incompetent like a sort of a Keystone Cop, these black and white freaking silent movies where these guys would run around, like Three Stooges like level of behavior. This is like criminally incompetent, right? And Trump won't say anything about it.
Not being addressed. That does seem
Yeah,
crazy.
well, they're going to learn from this. The communication between the local police.
If you know anything about Trump, he hates incompetence, and he talks about this constantly. How much better he's doing the job than Kamala did, or Trump, or Biden did, or the people before him. These Obama. How much these people can't do it, and they can't negotiate a deal. He's always talking about other people's incompetence and how he can do it so much better. And for him to say, "Oh, they're going to learn from this," the guy shot you in the ear, and they're saying this traumatic event, and people died. Trumpers died, and you're going to come out and say all these things like, supporting the people that did this, and he's not going to go full Trump on the Secret Service and the people there, and not even speculate and say, hey, maybe this is a conspiracy, a deep state conspiracy that's more than just one person, right?
Who sort of had an idea, and then ultimately a man lifted himself up to the roof, could barely do it because he was pulling himself up, and he saw the man with the gun. The man with the gun pointed the gun at him. He thought he was probably going to get shot, but he was like pulling himself up, and because of that, he couldn't get to his gun, and he fell down. Actually, very badly hurt his leg, his ankle. I hear very badly, but he fell down, and he did. From what I understand, he did say there's a guy up there with a gun, and the shooting started very quickly after that. I think it forced the shooter to go maybe quicker. He was supposed to be a very good shot.
Yeah.
He was supposed to be a very good shot. He's a 20-year-old kid. Like, he's not some expert marksman. Never shot anybody before in his life, right? His first attempt at killing somebody is assassination of Trump. This is an official story, right? But listen how Trump is killing his other story.
My sons, Don and Eric, they can't believe what happened, but they said from 130 yards, a bad shot would hit that target almost every time. They said it's like in golf, sinking a 2-foot putt.
Yeah, it's not a tough shot.
It's not a long shot.
With a scope. With some sort of scope, right?
The Secret Service person had the long shot. He had triple the distance, actually.
Triple the distance. No, I just showed you guys, right? It was a shorter shot, but it wouldn't be triple, right? It wouldn't be triple. It wouldn't even be double. It would be like, 30 more yards, right? Okay, so I'm editing today's Thursday, August 15th, and I did most of this video yesterday. But him saying it's triple the distance, so 130 yards tripled would be 390 yards. So that's 4 football fields. Like, it's silly. Like, it's not triple the distance. It's actually shorter, like I said. But, like, Trump just makes things up. You'd think that something where his life was threatened, he would be more factual. Like he has victim consciousness on his side. That's what this is about, right? He has been victimized, and it's a culmination of the left's attacking him. People are blaming the media at the very least for demonizing him and provoking this kid to do it. He doesn't even mention the kid by name, right? say his name, Trump, like he just, And so he's buying into the official story, and he's not pushing back at all like Trump usually does. And he's praising all these people that failed him. Like bullets were whizzed by his head. I mean, he isn't traumatized by the thing at all. Like he wasn't. Like he hadn't changed at all. Like something like that would change you. A near-death experience. I mean, it's just because it didn't happen. It's a totally fake thing. So he's just making stuff up. And he's saying they made an incredible shot from 3 times the distance. They were right behind him in the stage, and the buildings that were right behind him. So if it was a longer distance, which it isn't, it'd be an extra 10 yards or 15 yards, not double or triple. But Trump's always doing things like that, right? Like it's always got to be bigger. And why would you be that way about something like this? Why would you have to embellish it? And his story is constantly changing. It's just, I mean, it's really bad. But he didn't have a longer shot. And so like he's supposed to have, I mean, somebody just tried to kill him. And he doesn't have accurate information, right? Is he going senile himself? I mean, he's certainly getting older and slowing down and having memory issues. But I mean, where's this information coming from? This guy should have better information than I do, right? Like,
it was a terrible thing. Look, it's hard. I have to say this about the Secret Service. When I went down, and I went down based on, I think they're screaming, but other people also, because people saw this happen. You had so many people. One of the
so let's go.
miracles was that nobody ran. I mean, the shooting started very quickly after that. I think it forced the shooter to go maybe quicker. You're supposed to be a very good shot.
Yeah.
So he's saying that he's going to go quicker here. And then he's going to talk about this a little bit more. But this dispels his whole theory that this was, because if the guy's shooting at his head, and he would have hit his head had Trump not moved, then the guy got off a quality shot. And so what Trump is saying here is, so the story that Trump is now telling completely contradicts all that stuff about divine intervention and all these things. Because what he's saying is that this cop crawled up on the roof. And he was boosted up by another cop because some people were like, there's a guy up there with a gun. And so the official story is some cop looks up, he gets up there, crawls up, and puts his head up on the roof. And the shooter then turns his gun towards the cop. And realizing, okay, they see me now, I have to start taking my shot. Trump is now saying he's rushing, right? And so if you know anything about setting your rifle, because if you're holding a gun and you're trying to hold it steady, I mean, you can just do this like with a broom or something. Like, you're looking down your scopes. When you pull the trigger, you're going to pull it's going to move the gun a little bit. And it's hard to hold something completely steady. So he's going to use a bipod or a tripod or some sort of, shooting stand or something to hold the gun steady, right? So he's just holding the trigger, right? The gun's resting on something, and the gun is stable. Like he's not moving it. And, if you're anything that's going to use a scope, and the guy, we don't even know if the guy has a scope, right? But it takes a while to get something in your scope. Go look at something with binoculars. Like it's hard to, the scope is a very narrow, like it's not like you're getting full view that your eyes view. I mean, looking at something through a telescope or binoculars, it's a small area where you get to see. It's a focused area, right? And so you have to be able to, move the gun around until it comes into your sights, until it comes into the scope, right, where you can see, in this case, Trump's head. So on one hand, Trump is saying that the guy took a miracle shot that, was going to hit his head, but at the last second, Trump turned his head. But I showed you in the earlier videos that Trump's head was turned to the side for most of that minute and a half before the first shot, grazed his ear. He's saying grazed his ear. Like if you see the video, and I showed this so many times, that Trump kept on turning his head to the side and pointing to the chart. So the guy would have already been aware of that. And so Trump is saying that the guy took a shot that was going to hit him in the head and kill him, but Trump turned his head at the last second, and that didn't happen. That's inaccurate. Trump also said that there was blood gushing out. He touched his ear with his hand, and he had blood on his hand. There's no blood on his hand ever. You never see any blood on Trump's hand. The only blood is on his face, his ear and his face, right? And so, I mean, like these is inaccurate information. So now he's saying that the guy rushed the shot, and that's maybe why he missed. It wasn't divine intervention. It wasn't all these things. He's literally contradicting the premise of his story that he is somehow divinely protected and God is using him. And Elon Musk is saying, oh, you're talking about immigration. God must really care about immigration in America, right? It's stupid. God doesn't give a fuck about immigration in America. Like he doesn't, there's no, God isn't a person. God doesn't have political views, like none of these things, right? God is calling you back to himself, right? Anything that is going to bring you back to God, and usually those things are miseries. When people are happy, they don't go to God. They don't express their gratitude to God. They think about themselves being responsible for their accomplishments and their happiness. When people are miserable, that's when they turn to God. And so God doesn't care about, like any of these things. God doesn't have a mind to care about these things, right? And so there's no divine intervention like Trump being protected. It's silly because this whole thing is staged. And Trump is saying that the guy, was seen by this cop, and then he turned the gun around, immediately got Trump in his sights, and rushed the shot, and that's why he missed. But like it's contradicting the whole thing. It just doesn't. Why are you saying these different things, right? When he never says anything about, well, maybe there was more than one person, or maybe this was an operation involving the Secret Service, and this was a deep state conspiracy, right? Like pretty much every Trumper believes this is a deep state conspiracy, but their cult leader, won't say it. Why won't he say it, right? Well, because he knows it's fake, and if he says things like that, they might rat him out or whatever, right? So he's not going to blame anybody for something that's staged and fake. How can he blame somebody that could easily say, hey, we weren't even there? Well, the Secret Service, this was a bunch of actors up there. We were, it's completely plausible that they might rat him out, right? So Trump is going with the official story, not casting blame, not saying the victim consciousness he used for the election, and he uses for every time they persecute him or they sue him or they go after him, right? He's in the media, the way they cover him, and how the media is allowing Kamala to have fake crowds and have use AI generated crowds, and his crowds are so much bigger. He cares about that, but when he was shot in the ear and someone tried to kill him, he's got nothing but praise for any of these people, right?
He said from 130 yards, a bad shot would hit that target almost every time. They said it's like in golf,
Yeah.
sinking a 2-foot putt.
Yeah, it's not a
No,
tough shot.
It's not a long shot. The Secret Service person had the long shot. He had triple the distance actually. So
But again, if he has a bipod or a tripod and the gun's resting, and he's got the Trump in his sights and it's locked in, and when he pulls the trigger, the gun's not going to move, and his sight is set correctly, he would still need a scope or something, or a laser pointer or something like that, to have it locked in. Yeah, then it would be a somewhat, reasonable shot. But like the wind would be a factor in these other things, right? But even with all of that, he has to have some sort of a scope, and he has to have this thing locked in. If he was holding the gun without any support, it would be moving. And this guy's an amateur. He's a 20-year-old kid, right? And so, to think that he'd get a headshot on the president with all these things going on and people coming up behind him, and he's rushed, he's sped up and he's triggered, is silly. Like the whole official story doesn't make sense because this kid isn't, to have some people come up and confront him where he turns the gun at those people, then turns the gun back on Trump, able to get Trump in his sights and fire off a clean headshot that Trump was averted by turning to the side, even though he had been facing the side for over a minute and a half, and the guy is in a completely different angle. See, it's all wrong. Like, so if these facts are not facts, and these things can be easily debunked, then what really happened? Well, there was no, like Trump's ear didn't get hit, right? There was no grazing of his ear.
It was a terrible thing. Look, it's hard. I have to say this about the Secret Service. When I went down, and I went down based on I think they're screaming, but other people also because people saw this happen. You had so many people. One of the miracles was that nobody ran. I mean, if a gun goes off, the crowd
Yeah,
control people showed us this. When guns go off, and it does happen in stadiums at a soccer match or some kind of a match, everybody flees. They call it a stampede, like cattle. But everybody, and a lot of
yeah,
people get killed with those stampedes. We had
sure.
more people than you'd have at some of these matches or these games, and nobody left. You had a small group behind us in the grandstand, and that was full. And you look at it as it was taking place, and normally they'd be running. They didn't leave. They saw that I was hurt. They saw a lot of blood, and they saw that I went down. And it's almost like they wanted to be with me. Well, out front,
They wanted to be with me. So this is cult. This is Trump's cult love because when the bullets are flying, you have your own families and your own life, but somehow Trump is more exalted and more important than you. That you're going to keep your head up and allow yourself to catch a stray. I mean, he praises all these people, the guys behind him in the crowd, for their love and they're wanting to drink the Kool-Aid and go down with them. And they're not doing what you would do, which is normal self-preservation type of movements, right? And so, like, this is completely screwed up. But this is, I talked about this in my last video, that this is why Trump is upset about the audience size. Because Trump wants to show everyone that he's more loved, more passionately loved by his dopes. But these are dopes because he knows they're dopes because he's lying to them. That he does these, like, this is the kind of relationships that Trump has where he lies and manipulates to people, lies and manipulates people, and pretends to think and be like them and tell them what they want to hear. And when they give him love back, he thinks it's pure and it's good and it's right, but it isn't because it's coming out of a deception on his part. But he believes his lies so much now. And because he's not contradicted by the people around him, and anybody who criticizes him has Trump's derangement syndrome and, these things. I mean, that's what his believers believe, and he believes as well that, anybody who confronts him with his own bullshit. And so he's able to come out with these contradictory theories here, right?
you had thousands, tens of thousands of people. As far as the eye could see, you had people in Butler, as far as the eye could see, and uh,
Yeah,
and a lot of press too. There were many.
Okay, so it wasn't 100. It wasn't a football field length of people. Like it wasn't like these people they were sitting out here, and you can see past the football field. You can see multiple football fields, right? It wasn't as far as the eye could see. Like there was no one over where the shooter was. Like it was 130.
Cameras on watching this. It's what makes it so different because normally things happen that aren't good, but you never have a picture of it. Here we have all these cameras shooting it, so
yeah,
sort of amazing. But one of the interesting things was that you didn't have anybody flee, you didn't have anybody stampede,
sure.
nobody. And there were some people behind me. They stood up and they're looking like I mean, I'll tell you,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
want to have them in a foxhole with you. I want to meet some of those people
sure,
because
sure.
it's so different from what you heard. But so so I was down, but the Secret Service
Yeah,
guys, there were bullets flying right over my head. You could hear them go whizzing,
yeah,
and these guys came jumping on top of me, and a young lady, Kate, uh,
Kate was there.
would jump. They moved so fast, and let me tell you, that took tremendous courage. Now there was
Tremendous courage. Like that's their job, but it's courage.
a lack of coordination. There was, obviously everybody understands that somebody that building should have been covered, and
yeah, yeah. I mean,
that was
I
the
think
big
that
thing.
like, I mean, looking at the aerial views, that building would be like the number one spot for a sniper. I mean, it's like the
The only spot. The only spot, not the number one spot. The only spot where they were going to get a clear shot at him. Other than that was somebody who would be in the crowd. But in the crowd, you're not going to be able to get it set up on a tripod and get an actual, like have something to supporting the gun where you're going to have no movement. You're going to have some guy with a handgun or somebody with a machine gun just, unloading as many bullets as possible, but without any, like, guarantee. I mean, somebody bumping them or somebody grabbing them, people pulling the guy down next to him, right? So, your best shot was up on the roof. Your only shot, right? That's the only thing they had to do. And like Trump's not calling him out.
If you were to pick, like, what is the favorite? What if you? So if the goal is to assassinate, what's your favorite spot? That building. The
You're
roof of
right.
that building would be number one.
That would have been the spot.
It's like you
The
couldn't
only spot.
ask for a better
No,
location. It's like number
no, that
one.
would have been the spot.
Um,
You know what people think
yeah,
is when the local policeman, who, by the way, he really he did what he was supposed to do. He couldn't hold on any longer. And then when he got
yeah,
his head just peeking above, this guy standing there with a gun at his head.
So this is where he really can, like, he doubles down. He had the opportunity to realize, like, he just can't stop. Like, he can't self-perceive and realize that he's contradicting his miracle story here.
And when he fell down, again, hurt his ankle very badly, but he was making the calls. But what happened is the firing took place very soon. So what they
yeah,
think is that this guy ran to his site, which he had all planned out with the gun. He ran to the site and he started shooting fast, and maybe that's why he sort of missed. I mean, he uh,
yeah. But
he
as you
got
said,
me, but
he
it
would have
could have
hit.
been
I mean,
a much
yeah.
bigger problem.
But he totally would have hit if you hadn't turned your head. So, like, there was it was a very near
It
thing.
was a
So,
miracle. If I hadn't
um,
turned my head,
yeah,
What do you mean? So you were saying the guy was. So now your story is, he turned around and he saw the guy, pointed the gun at the guy who climbed up the roof, who couldn't hold on any longer, fell, hurt his ankle, and then he runs over, puts the gun down, and quickly starts to fire, gets you in his sights, and that's why he missed. But he did miss because you turn your head. So he has two different stories here, and Elon Musk just called him on his bullshit. Like, why are you saying that story? Like, so you don't know anything that happened, right? Like, when something didn't happen, you just make shit up. When it's a lie, then you're going to make things up, and you have to make other lies that contradict your previous lies, and he just did that, right? Like, it's just silly. Like, it's just freaking silly. And he had a chance to stop talking about it. Like, he changed the subject, but he came back around to it. And, like, you're looking at this guy to disseminate information and explain things to you. I mean, that's why you're going to him as a Trumper and Elon Musk. And they're like, I mean, it's silly what they're saying. Like, these are grown-ass men who are talking about something in silly terms. Something that's basically impossible. Some 20-year-old kid got a clean headshot at the president, but the president turned his head a minute earlier. and so it missed it. It only grazed his ear, and the blood was gushing. And then, they're going to get into the thing with him pumping his fist now. We'll get into that because that's hilarious.
I would not be talking to you right now. As much as I like you,
exactly.
I would not.
Yeah,
I would
well,
not be talking to
I
you.
mean, he's talking to me from another realm, perhaps.
Yeah, that's
Um,
right. We'd be talking from a
so
different place. But it was a
Okay, so again, Trump said that the guy was rushed, and that's why he missed. And then Elon Musk said, but you were just talking about how it was a miracle, and you turned your head. He's like, yeah, so let's go. He said that I'd be talking to you from a different realm. I'd be dead. So the idea of it hitting his ear, and I said this over and over again, was so important because it made it like, well, they just missed his head. He could have been killed, right? No blood, no ear. This isn't, the event is already forgotten about, right? And so the ear was essential to this fake event, like hitting him in the ear. Like if you hit him in the shoulder or Trump had a bullet, these things, right? But again, that's him getting shot. So, so like him grazing his ear and then coming up with ketchup on his ear and raising his hand saying, fight, fight, fight. This is where they get into that. This was what made this event, right? This was what made this event pop. And this is what really worked for Trump, right?
it was a very terrible experience. The Butler Hospital, they did such a great job. The doctors were so good. Everybody.
Okay, so you didn't get any stitches? Like you had a boo-boo, right? Like how many people would go to a hospital if there was dry blood in a cut that was less than a centimeter that clearly didn't need stitches? How many people would go to the hospital? Like this is a boo-boo. This happens on a daily basis if you have kids and things like this, right? People getting, I mean, if you're working, doing physical work or you're playing a sport, these kind of little cuts and things you get, non-existent cuts. If you don't need stitches, you don't go to the doctor. I mean, most people don't. And they got it, and they had doctors on the site. He has a team of people, and so they looked at his ear and they were like, "Okay, it's all set." And said, since there was nothing in his ear anyway, I mean, it was just fake blood. But if there was like a little small cut, they wouldn't have. He went to the frickin' hospital.
He was so good. There was a mistake. If somebody knew, because people were hearing that, there was just a bad feeling that there was somebody was around. You know that story now. It's been pretty
Yeah,
well.
yeah,
And
yeah,
if somebody could have said, because they've oftentimes said, like there'd be a lightning storm or something. Because I've done, I think over 300. I think I did a lot more than that, but we did a lot. And oftentimes they'll say, "Sir, could you wait 10 minutes, please? Sir, could you wait 20 minutes? There's a storm overhead or lightning or something, right?" And
yeah,
that happens
yeah,
often. And
So one thing I haven't talked about is intuition, right? Sometimes you have a feeling, but there was a guy walking around, and there was enough people that were aware of it, and they're saying there's a complete breakdown of communication. They would have immediately, if they saw a guy on the roof, they would have got Trump off the stage. They saw the guy on the roof, right? The snipers did. There's enough people to see the guy on the roof. Never mind shoot the guy, but get Trump off the stage. You take away the target, and the guy's just out there on his own, right? And so there was, the first thing they do is, I mean, they just remove the potential crime, the potential target. And this is such an epic failure. And also having the intuition that, like, if something doesn't feel right, these things. And people have that, like, normal people and people who do this job, people who are concentrating on something, and their one job is to prevent something like this. And for them to allow so many mistakes and so many signs and so many opportunities to prevent this thing, and then it to be as fake as it is, right? And Trump to be lying to his people like this, his supporters, when clearly there's, this is not, I mean, it didn't happen, right?
this would have been a perfect time for that to have happened, but it
yeah.
didn't get coordinated. That was the problem.
Well, it was your. I think your actions in the heat of fire, and like what I find admirable there was that you can't fake bravery under such circumstances. The courage is instinctual, or it is not. It's not a
You can't fake bravery under some such circumstances. That Trump popped up after cowering and losing his shoes. And I'm saying cowering is a joke, but like it's the right thing to do. People are shooting, you hit the ground. You shouldn't get shot, right? I mean, it's not brave to get shot for no reason, right? I mean, it's one thing if you take a stand based on your principles, but if there's just random gunfire, I mean, it's like if you don't want to get stung by a bee and you run away from the bees, you're not being a coward, right? I'm not going to, those bees can't make me run, yeah, well, could get stung, right? And so, I mean, getting shot, I mean, not just in terms of being killed, but you could be paralyzed or, you're going through months of rehabilitation. I mean, it's horrible stuff, right? No reason for it. If you can avoid it, you avoid it. But him popping up like this, and then Elon Musk saying, this is a moment of bravery.
not a rehearsed action. And so I just want to say that I
Not
think
a
a lot.
rehearsed action. Let's listen to that again.
But it
Yeah.
didn't get coordinated. That was the problem.
Well, it was your. I think your actions in the heat of fire, and like what I find admirable there was that you can't fake bravery under such circumstances. The courage is instinctual, or it is not. It's not a rehearsed action. And so I just want to say that I think a lot of people admire your courage under fire there. And
Right.
Courage under fire, not a rehearsed action. Clearly rehearsed because it was fake as fuck, right? It's not admirable because, again, he's not acting the way he should have. He's he's not sticking to protocol. Like he's making a political, iconic moments of the posters and the shots of him with his fist raised and the fight, fight, fight and all these things, right? Like he's creating a historical moment of false bravery. This is stolen valor. They're talking about stolen valor from White Welts, whatever his name is, the vice president candidate. Don't tell me, don't care, don't need to know. They're saying he has stolen valor for lying about his military service, but Trump faking this to everybody and getting up and performing this WWE event. And I think people kind of know it's fake, but they're going along with it. I mean, it's just so freaking fake. So just let me say this. I was going to say this in the introduction. I forgot. And it's kind of the most important part. And so when you have a customer base, right, you have people who are supporting your work, supporting your business, or in this case, Trump's candidacy, or for me here in my YouTube channel, how you treat your customers, how you treat these people that are benefiting you in one way or another is really important in defining you as a person, right? Because these people are, in a sense, not in a sense, but are sent by God. They're a part of the divine system, right? If you eat an animal, well, you have to thank the animal's soul. You have to be grateful to God, at least, for providing you with that animal or that vegetable or fruit or whatever it is. You know, being in gratitude for your food is something we take for granted because it's so abundant, right? How many people are really grateful? You know, you might say some sort of grace if you're a Christian or you're a religious person. But how many people are actually grateful and think about all the things that we have that are in abundance, that are supporting our existence and, you know, benefiting us in some way or another, right? Being grateful to the things that benefit you and the people that benefit you. And if you are somebody who has like a vision, or you have some life's work that you're trying to accomplish, in this case, a politician, then your voters you have to be grateful for, right? You have to be grateful to them, or at least to God for providing them in some way or another. And it's always best to be grateful to God instead of, you know, you could be thanking everything. You know, this is a teaching from the third master of the Sajmark system. You know, thank you air, thank you apple, thank you water, right? You could be thanking everything constantly. Like every time you take a breath, you could be thanking the oxygen and the earth. I mean, you could be thanking the earth all the time and the atmosphere and the planet and all these things, right? And if you just have this blanket gratitude to God for everything that you're receiving, not only on the physical level, but also on the spiritual level, because you have something to accomplish. And to accomplish something, you need help from other people. And sometimes that help can come in the form of miseries, right? So how you treat these people that are supporting you, in Donald Trump's case, they're not only voting for him, but they're passionately supporting him, defending him. They're sending him money. They're showing up in large, you know, crowds and things like this. How do you thank those people? And Donald Trump thanks them by lying to them constantly, by manipulating them and playing on their emotions and telling them what they want to hear, even though he doesn't believe in himself, right? And so he's a real piece of shit because, you know, he's doing that all the time. And he takes it for granted because he can tell them a lie, get caught in the lie, and they don't even care. So he doesn't even worry about how it appears, even when something is so WWF. Remember when I said WWE? You know, remember when I said this looked like some WWE World Wrestling entertainment event? And then people sent me, said that he had appeared with Hulk Hogan on a, you know, he had appeared with Vince McMahon in some old WWE, and I found it. And he had done a number of events where he became a participant in those events, right? Where he beat up Vince McMahon and, you know, this completely fake. And then he rolled out Hulk Hogan and Dana White. I mean, Hulk Hogan specifically, you know, Kid Rock and these people at his inauguration. And I mean, it was just so blatant. And, you know, with these Secret Service agents, looks like these WWE security guards are like, you know, they look like fake actors. I mean, the whole thing was just so WWE. And it's my initial impression of it. And then he just confirmed it, right? But even with that being so obvious, Trump supporters aren't willing to even take a look at it. Even if they kind of know he's lying and faking, they go along with it, which is, you know, part of their own cult behavior and dependency, right? So I'm grateful that I have viewers. I like doing this job. It's an easy job for me to do in terms of my personality type. You know, I have things to offer. I feel like, you know, I have things, ideas, and, you know, visionary stuff and whatever I have to offer. Certainly things that to do with the spiritual insights and my experience and stuff. So I feel like, you know, I have something that can benefit other people, and this is a great platform for me. I'm grateful to, you know, I mean, God for everything, but YouTube and the people that come to my channel. And so, you know, how do I respond to people? Like, what do I do for you all that is a sign of my gratitude and my, my feeling for, whatever it is. Grateful, the gratefulness I feel for people who come to this channel, right? And people support the channel, people give money, people, support in one way or another, leave positive comments, whatever it might be. Well, first of all, I don't manipulate you or deceive you. I'm not trying to manipulate people. I'm not trying to force an agenda on you. I'm not trying to force you in one way or another. I'm not playing on your emotions. I'm not, telling you what you want to hear. I don't stroke people's egos. I don't, do things where I give people individual attention or do things to make people feel like I don't cultivate that sort of, fan, star kind of relationship that is so present on these social media platforms. Like I don't like to look at it that way, right? Like I'm somehow, like a celebrity or something. Like I don't think of myself as that. I'm just talking to myself, right? Like this is me talking to myself, and some of you choose to listen to it, and I feel like there's value in what I'm saying, but that doesn't set me apart as being some sort of, egotistical celebrity or something. And I don't, cultivate that by, like people who look up to me or have some sort of positive regard for me. Like I don't encourage that through my behavior and giving you individual attention or whatever it might be that your ego requests. But what I do is tell you the truth to the best of my ability and help you, perhaps prepare for what's about to happen based in the knowledge that I have, and not even just the calamity that's going to be the apocalypse, but really more importantly, connecting to God right now and reevaluating, why you do things and how you do them, and who you are as a person and character development, things like this, right? Things you don't hear from other people. And so, example of this is I had years of doing the Sajmark system, and it's transformed my life, right? Like anything I have to offer here is tied to my doing the Sajmark system. As I said earlier, I had my time of being a dummy, a young dope, punky and, arrogant and a lot of bad qualities, angry, not really, just non-contributing person, non-contributing MNFer, right? I had my, period, my dark period of all that stuff. Really not having a goal, not having anything to focus on, not, doing anything to benefit anybody else, and just sort of stuck in a rut and, lost. And then having my, the blessing of Sajmark system, which, had that not happened, I, wouldn't have really anything to offer now. And so I'm well aware of this spiritual blessing that I was given that, I, in a way I didn't deserve at the time. Like maybe I'd done something in the past or what potential or was going to do something in the future. But at the time I wasn't deserving of it, right? But it, it was something that transformed me as a person and gave me direction and focused and helped me, I was always an underachiever and, helped me hone some of these abilities to where I've been, a much more successful person in all fields, right? And I believe the Sajmark meditation with the transmission and cleaning is the solution to all the problems we have now and everything that's going to happen in the future. Like I firmly believe that based on my experience and, seeing it work for other people as well. Not everybody digs it or can do it or whatever, but the people who do, I've seen, transformations and just, elevating people's consciousness and all these things, right? And so it's something that I was glad to share with people, my experience, but not in a sense where, you have to, it has to resonate with you and whatever. Like I can't, have the experience for you, but let people know that this is something that's been great for me. And so there was a handoff, a transition between the third master of the system, Master Charji, who was great, and this guy, Kamlesh Patel, who, I had good experiences with, and I saw that he had all the spiritual work done on him to to fulfill his responsibilities and do this job that he was given, which is a hard job to do, being the president and master of the system. And in the beginning, it looked like he was going to do a great job when he was first nominated, and I had some positive experiences with him, and I had seen him transform through the work that was being done on him to prepare him for this job. Like I was in India when all those things happened. And then he started to do some fucked up shit. And it was not consistent with the teachings. It was a huge drop off from the stuff that Master Charji had done. And I was put in a kind of awkward position because I had personal issues with him Like he had done like fucked up things in regards to me. He took my ex's side in the divorce, which was bizarre. But there was like he was throwing people out of a gathering, which was, like just one failure after another. And some of the things were my personal experience, and I couldn't say that, maybe they were my samskaras, these things I had to go through, or they were an indication that the guy had, shit the bed. Like he was a failure to launch, right? And I was telling people about the system, and, I felt kind of responsible for two things, right? If I tell them like how bad, some of the things he's done are, and I was just getting an inkling of it, that would spoil the system for them because they hadn't had experience with the previous guy. And if they heard, the things that I knew about Comlish, right? I mean, this is why I'm talking to my wife about it, right? My wife, who, I should have to tell her my story, and I'm going to prejudice her against this guy and really the system in general. Like, so it's a big deal. Like, I'm not wanting to do that, right? My brother, he was very negative a lot of the times, and he was the caretaker of the ashram. He used to call me and complain about people all the time. And he married a woman who, who wasn't doing the system. And I asked him, do you think she'll start? And he said, well, no, because, all the things I told her, right? And so, like, he's done her a disservice because there's this system that he does and he loves, and yet his complaining and his, gossiping about other people had prejudiced someone in his life that he, would hope would benefit from the same system against the system. So I was very wary of that, right? Because if I said the things about Kamlesh and you didn't have the other experiences I had with him, in terms of him taking an interest in me as a preceptor and, some of the other things I'd see him do and some of the, the good things he had been a part of, he'd be an effective preceptor and a volunteer and contributor to the system. But now he was having some missteps and they were head shaking things. And so there was that. But then as I saw that this was like really bad and he was doing scams and he was taking advantage of people, it was my duty to warn my viewers who were doing the system about it, right? And so it was a difficult thing for me because the Sajmark system to me is the solution. And when I slammed the system, and at least in terms of this guy Dodgy, Kamlesh Patel, it was going to affect people's desire or their trust in the system. And yet, I couldn't have this information withhold it from people, and it was stressful for me, right? It was a stressful thing for me to go through. But people are coming to me for the truth, and this is the truth, right? And I can disseminate it as best I can, but I can never really clearly articulate how great the Sajmark system is and how much of a fucking shithead this guy is accomplished. Like, I mean, it's just both things are, like there's no way to balance those things out. But I did my best, and like I said, it was one of the more stressful things I had to deal with, right? But the truth is what I present here, and this is the truth as I see it. I'm not a pure vector or lens of the truth, but I do my best to be objective and see things the way that they are, at least on the level that I'm capable of seeing them, and then present the information here. And, I can see it that Trump does the exact opposite, Elon Musk here, right? These are people who are using information to get a desired response from the people that are supporting them, right? And they're lying and manipulating people to get that response. And that's the worst kind of person out there who's, looked up to as a vector of information, as somebody that is a reliable source and isn't, right? And so, of course, Kamala and the other side is the same way. They lie to the people that are supporting them and the people that are, helping them achieve their goals, and that's really fucked up. Like, if they'll treat you like that, then how they're going to treat their enemies, right? When they're treating their supporters like that, the people that love them, well, how are they going to treat the people that hate them, right? So these are, horrible people. When I think about Trumpers or just people in general, I have good dogs. Papillons are kind of pre-trained in a different way. They kind of heal naturally, and they're just quality dogs, right? They're a good breed of dogs. And they want to please their owners. They want to please, my wife and I, and they're just positive dogs, and they want to be obedient. But, sometimes their nature takes over, right? So we were walking in our pasture. I've made these paths in our pasture, and we walk around. Sometimes, my wife's not here. I'll take the dogs out, and then we walk together. My wife and I were walking around with the dogs, and we came upon a place where an animal was killed by what looked like a coyote. And the coyote left what looked like some sort of a kidney and some sort of intestines. And my dogs are sniffing it, and we don't know if it was a bigger animal. We don't know if it was a small deer or a raccoon or something, but it had, the organs were fairly big, and we didn't want our dogs eating them, right? Like, it's not, organ meat is good for dogs, but we don't know if they're worms or whatever, and our dogs will sometimes wait to eat something after it's gone. It gets pretty ripe. I had a border collie named Lucy who, I would bury chickens. We had chickens that were dying. Our chickens got some signs of disease, and when they turned about 2 years old, they would start to die. And so I had chickens buried. I had we had lots of chickens, and they were dying at a rapid rate. And I was burying them in the yard. Like, I had probably 30, 40 chickens buried. And after they were buried in the ground for a period of time and they started to ferment, Lucy would smell them and dig them up and eat them. And if I just handed her the dead chicken, she wouldn't eat it. Like, if it freshly died. But after it had fermented, she sought them out, right? Which is kind of weird, but there's something there. And, she didn't seem to have any problems with it. But my dogs now, they'll eat things. Like, there was a time my wife and I were driving around, and we were at this park, this sort of, nature park. And we smelled a dead animal. And we were like, oh my God, it smells so bad. We opened up the windows. It was horrible. It smelled like horrible. And it kept on getting worse. We were driving, we're not even where it's at because this thing's smelling up, acres of land. I mean, there's like hundreds of acres in this park. We're driving around like probably half mile away. And we're like, it's smelling even worse now. I turned around and saw my dog had just puked up a dead mouse that was like, it must have been, horrible. It was one of the worst things I ever smelled. And she had eaten it, right? Sometimes my dogs eat chicken poop. Like, they're just, I mean, it's gross, and it's one of the grossest things. And they want to lick you in the face and these things, right? But what I'm saying here, they tried to go back and eat the organs later on, like 3 days later. And I think one of them ate some of the organs and then threw up, right? And so, I mean, it's not good behavior and they're being disobedient. But, it's hard to communicate that to a dog. And, they're dogs, right? I mean, it's part of their nature. And you can, you can train them and try to curtail some of these behaviors. But sometimes dogs are going to do what dogs do. Just like stupid people are going to do what stupid people do. And some people just don't have the ability and the potential to see beyond their circumstances and their tragic lives. And they're just going to go down doing the same stupid shit over and over again. You know people like this in your life. You can't help them. You can talk to them. You can, tell them what to do or suggest what to do, or, you can do your best to help them break the cycle, but they just can't do it. And all of us struggle with that on some level or another, right? We all struggle with our tendencies, and there are some scars and, things and, bad decisions and making the same mistakes over and over again. And so, you can be compassionate to it, but you also have to leave people behind, especially if people are going to go down that path, you have to let them live with their mistakes, right? Whether it's your kids or your loved ones, or especially nowadays with, the stuff with the bloop and the rooster and, all these things. Roost, people getting the rooster and all these things that they're doing. And then if they get, cancer or something happens to them because of their choice, you let them live with their choice, and you don't have to take responsibility. You did your best to warn people, but, people don't want to listen. They're going to do their own thing. It doesn't need to be hatred. There just needs to be, a letting go and letting, just let it happen type attitude. And that's, for Trumpers and this whole thing and everything that's happened in the world, it's people are going to fail, and they're going to fail badly, and there's going to be consequences for their failure. And, you can't let them, you can love them, but you can't let them drag you down with them. All right, let's get back into it here.
A fire, and what I found admirable there was that you can't fake bravery under such circumstances. The courage is instinctual, or it is not. It's not a rehearsed action. And so I just want to say that I think a lot of people admire your courage under fire there. And
Well,
yeah, so
thank you very
yeah,
much. I appreciate it. I didn't think of it. I just wanted to get up and I wanted to stand up. I wanted to let people know, I felt I was good when they were on top of me, covering me, actually, very much covering me and very bravely. But I wanted to get up. I said,
Squirting ketchup on my ear.
I want to get up. And they wanted, they have everything there. They wanted stretcher. I didn't like the stretcher. And I knew I was
There's
hit
no stretcher there, right?
in the ear, but I knew I wasn't hit anywhere else. They felt I was hit someplace else
yeah,
because it was such a lot of blood. And they were sure that I was hit
Okay, so we saw no evidence of a lot of blood.
someplace else. And they were saying, "Sir, you were hit in more than the ear." I said, "Nope, I was hit in the ear. I want to get up. Let me get up." And so I got up, and the crowd didn't know what to think. I mean, this was so many people, and you could see they were confused. They didn't know what to think. And I wanted to let them know I was okay. It was very important for me to let them
yeah,
know that. And they went wild. You've seen the after. They didn't go wild when I
yeah,
got up because they didn't know, was I alive. You really couldn't tell when I stood up before the hand, before the fist in the air.
The people, I mean, the whole thing.
Uh, they didn't know if I was alive. Nobody did. And when I put the fist up, they were just relieved and happy and thrilled, and the place
They
went
just love me so much.
crazy. It was pretty amazing.
yeah.
It was a
Well,
terrible thing, but it
it
was
was
really nice.
incredibly moving. Yeah. Well, and I mean, speaking of the sort of slide that got you to turn that uh, saved your life, really,
It saved your life.
was the
But again, he was looking at the slide on and off. I mean, his head was moving a little bit, but he was looking at the slide for over a minute before the guy shot. I showed people the exact timing of it in the previous video. And so it wasn't like Trump was turned facing the crowd, and then at the moment he turned to look at the slide, the bullet went by him. That's the story they're telling. But clearly that's not what happened, right? So here it starts at 0. This video is 2 minutes and 9 seconds.
And that comes right from the government services.
So he's pointing to the chart.
Border Patrol.
Right, so he's moving his head back and forth.
So that arrow is the lowest.
So he's pointing there, right? 10 seconds in,
Ever in recorded
12
history
seconds
our
in,
country. And
15
then,
seconds in, right?
and then the worst president in the history of our country.
And his head is occupying the same space, right? It's turning a little bit, so it's minimizing the target. But if the guy had a proper headshot, it would have hit him no matter what, because the guy he's got him in his sights, right? Like you'd have to have him in his sights to be able to take a quality shot here. See, this is where Trump is. There's multiple simulations, and I looked at the grounds and pictures and in various videos, like these images of the place where the guy had to be to shoot Trump. And this is the guy where the guy had his only available angle because of the bandstands where the crowds where they're at, and there's also like a crane there in the pictures. And so Trump's head would be having to turn towards the guy for the guy to have even a visual of Trump's ear, right? Otherwise, it has to go through the left side of Trump's head or the front of Trump's head to hit him in the ear. And Trump's never doing that, right? And their story is that just when the guy shot, Trump decided to look at the chart. But that didn't happen. Like Trump was, if the guy's getting Trump in his sights, he would see Trump's head is facing this direction. And his head's still occupying the same space, which I think I talk about more coming up here. But like the story just doesn't add up. Like we've established this in past videos. I'm just reminding people because Trump keeps on saying these things that can't be like they violate the laws of physics, right? And geometry, And so
Over. And look what happened to our country. Probably 20 million people.
see his head keeps on going back and forth.
And
It's
it's a little bit
30
old.
seconds in.
That chart's a couple of months old, and if you want to really see something that said Take a look at what happened.
See, he had, so him saying they turned his head. This is when it happened, 40 seconds in, and he was already looking at the chart beforehand, right? This is when they picked it up. So the long video of the coverage of it, it's probably longer. He's talking about the chart for a couple of minutes, right? And so the guy would have calculated that in the shot, right, where he's going right here, right? And so look, this is where his head is. And then, he did this, right? Then he looks at his hand, there's no blood, and then he gets down. And these people are all like, what's going on? And we don't know if they even heard gunshots. We don't know what they heard, and we don't know if these people are, they paid shills or, what are these people, right? And so, I mean, it's inaccurate what he and Elon Musk are saying here.
Illegal immigration slide. Maybe this.
That's right.
Maybe this is worth talking about that.
It was
that slide. That slide says
You're
save your
right.
life.
No,
Basically.
the illegal immigration saved my life. You're right, but it had to be at that exact angle.
I mean, that's the.
I thought it was God. Or maybe the guy was just rushed. Because when you're making stuff up, then you're just making it up, right? And, and so, they made a big deal about the chart. They made a big deal about him turning his head. I demonstrated in the other video how, and I talked a little bit about here, that his head was in basically the same proximity. Maybe there's a little bit of the head, maybe a little bit disappeared. He's got a big ass head, right? His ear is much smaller than his head. And, he's turning his head, but his head isn't really moving in terms of where it is. Like there's a square, foot of area where his head was in terms of like a target. So I say that, a number of times here, and I don't know if I can say it in a better way, but if you were going to fire a bullet, you're firing it into a window, like a window of space, right? And Trump's head is pretty much in that same window, give or take a little bit here or there as he's turning it, because he's got a big head, and there's a window, and the guy's aiming at like the center of the window, wherever he is, in terms of Trump's head, right? It's even though he's turning his head back and forth, it's still that bullet's going to hit that area, right? Like let's say you're firing a gun and the bullet's going to hit this area of space. Like for example, there's a deer there, and the bullet's going to go in this straight line and hit this area, and the deer moves, and it misses him, or it hits him somewhere else, or something like that, right? And so Trump's head is pretty much in the same area. And again, like there's nothing happening here. It's just all fake, but I'm saying that the story doesn't add up. Like Trump is making a big deal about this, the movement of the head, but clearly what he's saying, just like with the blood and all the rest of it, when you look at the video, you're like, well, that's not what happened. Right? So, like, if he's, again, now he didn't watch the video multiple times, and he didn't say, all right, there's no blood there, so I shouldn't say I saw blood on my hands. Because there wasn't any blood till he gets up, and that blood's already dried by the time he's walking to the SUV. And so the story is like BS, like it's not true what he's saying. And he knows it because he's watched the videos, or he should have. And the people around him, the handlers, should know it. But it doesn't really matter because nobody's going to call bullshit on this. Like even the Democrats, even Kamala. Because they don't. Like they're not going to say, all right, this doesn't add up because, they can't expose this level of a hoax. Because look at the various people that are involved in this hoax, including the Secret Service and all these other people. And so that would destroy credibility in the whole system, that they would participate in this hoax because Trump isn't able to do this without the blessing of the so-called controllers. Like Trump is, he's he can't get away with this. It's something he put out himself. He has to make sure that they're all going to go along with it. They're never going to confront something like this because this would destabilize the belief in the whole government, right? And so, but it's, the story doesn't add up, and he's the worst person to do something like this because he just embellishes and he makes things up. Like he just starts talking and he's always just creating his own story, his own backstory, his own facts. I mean, this is how he is, and so he's the worst person to do something like this because the contradictions are just there.
That's a great one. Saved by illegal
You know,
immigration.
the incredible
100%.
thing, though, when you talk about the odds, you had to be exactly at that angle. But the
Yeah,
incredible thing is that the chart, I used it less than 20% of the time. It was just a moment.
yeah,
It's always on my left, never my right, and it's always at the end of the speech. So here
yeah,
we have
So
it.
now he's again going back to the many different details and things that had to line up right for the story to take place, which we know wasn't the case because when the guy was taking aim and getting him in his sights, he was tilted towards the chart. And so, the whole thing is like, well, the guy was rushed, maybe that's why he missed, but he really did miss, and it was the luck of the, all these things, right? Because this is how Trump is. He's not based in something that really actually happened. And when you're making stuff up, when it's a lie, you have to create everything, right? A lie exists in its, you have to create a backstory for the lie. You have to create a universe. The lie becomes its own universe because it's different from reality, right? So every deception, I mean, this is the problem with human beings and, the deception, the level of deceptions that we engage in, they all have to come with, contingencies and details and, all these, like some sort of a motivation. And, it has to come with things that don't exist. You have to make up everything that surrounds the lie, every component, every little tangent, everything that, that needs to support the lie, right? Because you're creating your own reality. You're diverging from reality, right? So I want to add to this, this thing about deception. I think I covered extensively in my book, The Choice, but somewhere. The truth is, you just have to remember the truth, right? Now, your memories fade over time, your memories get distorted, but when you talk about something that comes from an actual event, you just have to remember the actual event and describe it. And again, there's some level of distortion there, but that's just it's not not doing that purposefully. It's just that the memories change over time a little bit, right? But in terms of something that's truthful, you just say what happens. And so when you're telling the truth, all you have to do is recount and say what happens. Of course, you can be nervous. You can have your own psychological issues. People are feel sense of guilt and shame, and so they start to doubt the truth, and that's the other part of this thing, right? People start to doubt what they saw, what they remembered, especially if a person comes in all confident and says, "No, this is what really happened." But in general, the truth is simple because it's what happened, right? Like there's something that happened, an event, and you just recall what happened. But when you make up something that didn't happen, everything has to be created by you. Everything has to be generated by your imagination and your ability is to make things up, right? You see this where people will say there was a guy and they go, "What was the guy's name?" And the person will look up, like you see this in a comedy or a movie or TV show, and say Doers. Like they'll be looking at they'll be at a bar and they'll look up and they'll see Doers Scotch or something. They'll say something like that, right? Or they'll say something that's like pinball machine, Mr. Pinball, they just look up and they're searching for a name and they see something in their room and they just say it, right? Because now you have to come up with all these things. You have to create everything. You're creating this universe, right? I think I say this somewhere else in the video. And so, that Trump, as he makes these things up, they're going to contradict each other because some of these things are opposing lies, where he's saying that the chart was on his left, as you write all these things about the chart and how there was this divine moment to make him turn his head at the exact moment, which we see didn't really happen, right? He didn't turn his head just at that moment. He was talking about the chart for at least 40 seconds, and that was just a video clip I showed you. There was a part where he acknowledges the chart and turns towards the chart, and that happened like minutes before. If I found the original videos, it's not really important because all you need to see is a little bit of that period of time to see that he didn't just turn his head right when the guy shot, right? That didn't happen, and he didn't turn his head towards the direction they're saying the shooter was at. And more importantly, there's zero evidence to show that his ear was actually hit, right? And so that whole thing's a lie. So he's talking about this miracle that made him, the shot was going to go for his head, like it was going to hit his head, but something divine intervention made him turn his head at the last moment and miss his head, but hit his ear to give him street cred because he has blood, and then he could have this big moment of pumping his fist and saying fight, 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 right? And so to create that moment, though, you have to make a story where the bullet just grazes his ear, and then you have to, overlook the fact that there's no scarring and he wore this big giant bandage, and the reality, he went to the hospital and needed no stitches, that he really wasn't hit at all, right? So, all these things are, whatever they are, they're BS. But then he tells a story about how the guy was rushed, and maybe that's why he missed. But your whole other story was predicated on the guy making an incredible shot at your head, and you just happen to turn. And so these things can contradict each other, these separate lies, these separate stories he's telling. Because Trump just bullshits. He just wings it and he makes things up. And he sounds convincing to his dopes, but these things don't add up. And then he just has to lie more about it. And he just tells these lies and things that we were all watching the video. We were all seeing that this didn't happen, right? We're all watching we're looking at his ear and we're like, well, your ear isn't hurt at all. Like, it's just, there's no evidence supporting any of these things happened, right? And that it's just, it looks so fake anyway with the WWE style entertainment that was involved. So he's actually kind of the worst person to try to pull this off, because when you're doing something like this, you just want to talk less and less about it. You don't want to embellish. You don't want to bullshit. You just want to, keep to the minimal aspect of the story and not add more and more lies to it, right? Like, that's what he's doing. He's adding more and more lies. Like, and it's just that makes it worse.
It's on the right, not the left. It's at the beginning, not the end. And even the people that put it up, they were unprepared, and they did a great job. They got it up immediately, fortunately. But I looked to the right, and the bullet came whizzing by, hitting my ear. So it was amazing. But when you think of the odds of that, and that normally you wouldn't use it. Normally I wouldn't have the thing, and then it would have been a very different story. It's very much, I say, an act of God. It's a miracle that it happened.
It's a miracle. Again, a miracle is a big, what a miracle is something that happens outside the fabric of reality, right? Changing material existence, right? Changing when they talk about Jesus' miracles, and miracles aren't a good thing unless you have God's permission, right? Because you're changing something that was going to happen a certain way. Is a script that has been laid out by divinity, and only if there's something that needs to change based in God's will, or the script needs to be edited for some reason, right? But you have a plan, and the plan is going, to work in coordination with human choices and the rest of these things. And so the thing that this idea of a miracle, with Trump, it's always got to be bigger than it actually is, right? So he didn't just go for like a fake shooting. He went for the whole enchilada. He went for the big kahuna. He went for the bullet hitting his ear, which was a bloody, fake ketchup of blood. And then he went for the pumping of the fist, and this idea that if he didn't turn his head, this whole story, like, they went for it all, right? They brought God into it. They brought, patriotism into it. They got him, pumping his fist, the whole, fight, fight, fight into it, right? And, I mean, it's fake. Like, he always goes over the top, right?
And I'm honored by it. I'm honored by it.
Well,
He's honored by God wasting a miracle on him.
but what were you about to say about illegal immigration before you were rudely interrupted with
Well,
a
I was
bullet?
going to say how good the numbers were. By the way, we're going back to Butler, and we're going to go
Great.
back in October. We're all set up, and the people are fantastic in Butler. It's a great area. Great. These are incredible people. Like the three that, in the case of Corey, killed, and the other two, the families I got to know them a little bit, and the families are great. But we're going back to Butler, And I think I'll probably start by saying, as I was saying,
As you
prior
were
to
saying,
being so
exactly.
horribly
So you just stepped on your whole introductory line, right? He's going to step on the introductory line. He's going back in October, right before the election, to remind everybody of the event. It's a whole thing because the guy's shameless. Like he went for something here, and he's going for all. You might as well go for all of it. If you're going to deceive your followers, you're going to, lie to everybody. You might as well go for the whole enchilada, right? But he went there.
interrupted,
Yeah,
but
yeah. So rudely interrupted by an
yeah.
assassination
So,
attempt.
but no, but the chart,
Some people have no manners.
Elon, the chart was just a chart that in my last week we had the best illegal immigration numbers, meaning stopping. It was at the lowest. You've seen the chart. It's become quite a.
So they really agree that immigration is the end of the country. Elon Musk is a big anti-immigration, illegal immigration person, although he's a legal immigrant. And they go into this thing for a good, I don't know, 15 or 20 minutes just talking about immigration. And Elon Musk then brings it back to, he starts to talk about Putin and the war, and I'm going to get into that in a moment. Let me just, I got this one voiceover to do here. Okay, so it's going to go full circle, and Elon Musk is going to bring this back up and talk about how intimidating Trump is. We'll get to that in a second. I have one more quick farming story here to do with my dogs. And so we have a possum, like a medium-sized opossum, that's sleeping in our barn. Possums are the cleanup crew. They eat dead animals, right? And it'd been there for, I don't know, a week or two. We were keeping our dogs away from it because our dogs would chase it at night. And I bring our dogs out to pee at night. And, if they sometimes chase frogs around the pond, at least Tulsi does. The bigger of our two dogs, Tulsi, is a stone cold killer. I always talk about how she's a stone cold killer. And she kills lots of different animals and eats them, baby rabbits, mice, these things. She had this epic chase with this duck some time ago. And my wife and I were watching it in the pond, and we thought the duck would swim her, but she was caning on it like it was crazy. And then the duck finally flew away. But, she will go after things. And they're small dogs. And so there was a possum outside, a big one my wife had seen. She brought her out because I had hurt my back and I couldn't move. Brought the dogs out. And they were running over there. They were like amped up when I'd opened the door, and they were like charging out there, right? But anyways, we found this possum in the barn. I'd found one time. We opened up the chicken house. We have these doors that you have the nest boxes where the chickens lay their eggs. And I opened up the nest box, and there's a possum. I almost thought it was a chicken, because sometimes the chickens will be broody, and I'll reach under them or pick the chicken up and take it out, and then get the eggs that are underneath the chicken, right? Broody means that they're going to hatch or brood, and there's a certain type of behavior, and they just sit on the eggs. And it was a possum, right? Big one. And so anyways, we had this opossum in the barn, and we noticed it, and then the dog, Lucy, smelled it. And then she was all amped up. Like she was really fired up. And she ended up harassing one of our chickens, who, when I picked her up, really smelled bad. And Lucy went and got her twice, like she went after her. And the chicken lost some feathers. I didn't know if Lucy had injured her or she was just dying. And Lucy smelled it, the infection, and something triggered her because she was already amped up over the possum. And this was a chicken called a Buckeye, which is like a version of a Rhode Island Red, but some kind of breed that comes from Ohio. I've talked about this chicken before. We got it about 5-6 years ago. It's an older chicken. And she's definitely not in good shape. And then she limped around for a couple of days, and she disappeared. And my wife saw her out of our back window, and she was kind of like, we look out this window all the time. We have a little small area where we have a sump pump that drains into a little pond I put out there. One of those little plastic ponds you get at Lowe's. And we have all kinds of animals that will get water, squirrels and various birds that will get water out of that pond. And there's just a lot of activity. There's a hummingbird feeder there. We had a little wren there. I put up a fence around air conditioning units so the cows wouldn't knock it over, and they'll sit on the fence. And so, this it's quite a viewing. Like it's like almost like watching TV. And somehow I looked out of this window for the last couple of days, but I hadn't noticed the chicken because it was just sort of laying there as a lump. It was hard to see. And I went to pick it up, and it had like maggots on it, and it stunk. I mean, even getting close to it, had been dead like 2-3 days. And so, and I want to talk about this in terms of like it was a job I knew I had to do, right? Like my wife, it would be hard for her to do that job. And I've been willing to do jobs like that, jobs that people consider dirty, right? I put on some rubber gloves and I picked the thing up with a bag and I double bagged it so it wouldn't, it would sit in our dumpster for a couple days. I mean, it's going to be, um, you know, it's going to be 4 days next Monday. So today's Wednesday, August 14th. So Monday, and what is that? 5 days from now, and it's got to sit there. It already stinks, so I double bagged it, right? But things that people consider dirty work, I used to think farming was dirty work, and labor that you do with your hands was somehow, it's just got a bad rap. Like people talk about white collar jobs being the cleaner jobs, right? Like this is dirty work, right? People consider it dirty work and work for stupid people. But I found it to be quite the opposite, right? I picked tobacco when I was 14 as my first job. And it's a gross job because tobacco has a resin to it. The tar and nicotine, the tar is, it comes through the leaves. And you have to sit down and take off the suckers and push dirt up on the side of the plant. Like that's what you do first. And then your like butt hurts at the end of the day. You're just like, you're back. And, like even as a young kid, it's not, you're shuffling down the tobacco rows. And then, you get on your knees, and your knees, like you're picking the lowest level leaves, and that hurts, right? For just you're walking down the the rows on your knees, and then when the leaves get bigger, they're full of this resin, and it just gets in your hair, and you have to wear a hat. Like it's just on your, it's hard to scrub off. It's tar, right? You're getting like this tar on your hands, and it's unpleasant work, right? I made $2.47 an hour. It was like my first job. Then I did some other jobs. I worked at a Caldor department store, and I worked at a pie plate as a dishwasher. And eventually I would work as a janitor when I was in college. My brother got me this job. He used to open up the town building. I talked about that in the past. And scrubbing toilets and doing shit like this. Not, it's like dirty work. And then eventually as a farmer, I was, I worked with cow dung, scooping cow dung up. You working with manure. I used manure, cow dung to make an earth oven, the outer layer of the earth oven and things. In this case, doing like, things with these dead animals, right? Like having to bury dead animals and all these things, like chickens, like I said before. We had a goat that died. It had got its stomach like blew up. It was bad. It like, they can get this, is it called colic? I'm not sure. But sometimes these pasture animals, their stomachs will blow up from, and you try to get baking soda. There's a ways that you can deal with it, but it just was a little tiny goat, cute goat, right? And so, there's these things you deal with that are unpleasant and dirty, whatever. My wife does things, clerical work and arranging things that like I suck at, and work that I've done before for the family. But, I really stress out about detail-oriented work, things that are bad for my dyslexia, my personality type and things. And so I much rather do these types of things that people consider dirty work. But then I worked as a counselor with sex offenders, which, the dregs of society. In a treatment center full of, the treatment center was run immorally, and the people that worked there that, would manage it were horrible people. So I've had these jobs that are, that are just unpleasant, but it's good to do that kind of work because you have to be willing to do the dirty work. And then as a preceptor, doing the spiritual cleaning on people's hearts. The heart is considered in the Sajmark system. It is the seat of divinity, so it's where your soul resides. Your soul is in a certain point. Your etheric soul is in your etheric heart, in the heart region. But it's also where you accumulate all your grossness, all your impressions, right? So there's a lot of like spiritual grossness in people's hearts, and that's a very, mild way of putting it. And I started working as a preceptor. I was made a preceptor for the Sajmark system years ago. And there was this Canadian guy who was kind of charismatic guy. He was a nurse, but also he's a chiropractor. Like he was a natural healer. He had a big personality, and he talked to me about doing the work. And he said, the first time he gave a sitting, he transmitted to the person and read their condition. And he saw a door, and so he opened the door. This is like, I don't want to call it imaginary, but something like you see in there, like almost like a dream in your pictures in your mind. And he opens up the door, and like sewage spilled out on him. Like he saw this image of sewage just spilling out for the next half hour or so. And he went to talk to the master and told him what he experienced. And the master said, well, what did the person look like afterwards? He said, well, the person had this lightness and glow to them, right? And so there's a element of this, spiritual grossness, right? That I, experienced doing these kind of jobs. Like things that, are unpleasant jobs, the dirty work, or, things that you're dealing with refuse in one way or another. And whatever you focus on, you get a taste of. You get like you experience. When you think about something or somebody, you watch something on TV, you get in contact with it, right? Like it affects you. Like you get an essence. You get the experience of the essence of the thing. And probably the dirtiest work that I do is here at this YouTube channel, because I cover the world depravity all the time. And, thankfully I'm kind of detached from it. And because of the spiritual work I do, and I just don't really care about it, it doesn't form lasting impressions. But, these are the most despicable people. They're lying and their deceptions, and, Trump and Elon Musk here, but, all the, by Kamala, I mean, all of them, all the Hollywood people, they're worst of the worst. And people think they're successful, big egos and things like this. But, these people are very spiritually gross, and they're just, not just the deception and the lies, but their intentions and their self-obsession, their, narcissism, and their egos and all of it. Like I said earlier, I don't get stressed out where people are limited and are unable to make the right decisions, because we have a lot of bad decision making going on worldwide. People not being able to make the right decision or even figure out what the right decision is. Like they're clueless. They can't even comprehend the right decision. And what they're doing has, sometimes it affects me. But in this case, these guys are lying to all of us, right? These politicians and people. And it has effects on our lives, right? Because they are presenting themselves as people who are worthy to listen to because of the way they're going to disseminate this information. And people are, eating up what they say one way or another, the Trump fans, the Elon Musk fans. And it's affecting their decision making and their reality. And they're being manipulated by these people who, they have enough money and power. These are billionaires, but it's still not enough, right? These greedy motherfuckers, they want they want to squeeze every last drop out of you as they can. They're not opposed to lying to you about it. So they talk about immigration, and I'd show you that because it's kind of worth listening to, but the thing's so long. But at the end of that, the immigration thing, Elon Musk drops this, gem here.
They just said he was bad, but that's okay. That's the way I get treated, and I don't mind that at all. What I can tell you is this: we cannot have a Democrat. We cannot have her. She's incompetent. She's as bad as Biden in a different.
Yeah.
Look, she hasn't done an interview since this whole scam started. And say what you want. This was a coup. This was a coup of a president of the United States. He didn't want to leave, and they said we can do it the nice way or we can do it the hard way.
Yeah, no, I'm there.
Okay, so you talked about him being mentally incompetent, right? Like this is the problem where, there's different levels of lying, but this is just blatant. He said that this guy was mentally incompetent. He said he's the worst president in history. He said the guy didn't know what he was doing. And so they should have got rid of him, right? The thing about immigration, going back, because they talked a lot about immigration, they've talked about how horrible it is. Now it's destroying the country. There's a chance for the Republicans to work with the Democrats, and Trump got them not to do that, right? Which Joe Biden should have brought up at the debate, and Kamala probably will. Because Trump and his people blocked immigration reform because they wanted to use it as a weapon against Biden in the election, now Kamala. And, if it was that bad, then a real man, like a real quality person, person of substance, a stand-up guy, right, would have wanted to push immigration reform through under Biden, even if it hurt him politically. But the Republican Party didn't want to do that, right? And that shows you what a scumbag Trump is. And so Trump has been talking about Biden being mentally incompetent, and getting rid of him was something that Republicans should have been pushing for. But they wanted to run against him, right? But now he's saying it's a coup. Well, yeah, but you wanted him to go because you can't have somebody like that running the country, or the presidency is a joke, which it is. Because Biden isn't mentally capable of doing that job, so he's not doing it. Like, he's not really acting as president because he can't. Like, it's not possible.
They just took him out back behind the shed and basically shot him.
What they did with this guy,
So
and I'm no
yeah,
fan of his, and he was a horrible president, the worst president in history. And one of the reasons he was so bad, first of all, the Israeli attack would have never happened. Russia would never have attacked Ukraine, and we'd have no inflation. And we wouldn't have had the Afghanistan mess, if you think of
Okay, so you would have had inflation for sure because Trump was already doing bailouts. And when he closed down the economy, the inflation was inevitable. They did $12 trillion worth of bailouts. So inflation was going to happen no matter what. Like, we don't have enough money. Anybody who knows anything about the economy, inflation should be way worse than it is. And it should have happened years and years ago because of the national debt and all the debt, right? That our country's insolvent right now. Our economy's insolvent.
it,
well,
and we wouldn't have had
yeah,
Afghanistan. But we think of
well,
it,
yeah.
you take a few of those events away, and we have a different world. We would also have
No, no, you're yeah.
inflation was caused by oil.
Yeah, no, no. I think you're making an excellent point here, which is that when other countries can, that are, are thinking about invading or doing bad things, when they're thinking about that, they're thinking about, okay, what's the American president going to do, and
See, this is the part.
uh, do they fear the American president, or is it someone they do not respect or and do not fear? And I think they would they rightfully be. I mean, look at that the footage with the assassination. They're like, okay, uh, President Trump is like, don't mess with me. I mean, that's like, whereas I think people are.
Fight, fight, fight. So he's getting this like tough Trump being a tough guy. Trump is not a physical tough guy. He's a big guy, but he's not physically tough. I don't know if the guy's been in a fight in his life, and I'm not saying that's a good thing, or a bad thing or whatever. But he's not a real tough guy, right? He plays golf. I don't know, like any kind of sports or whatever. He has an aversion. I showed you that clip of the last time he rushed the stage and he panicked, right? Like he just was I mean, he's somebody who is worried about his physical safety, and he's not one of those, crazy fighting MNFers. And one of the things that I think Trump did well, which was very positive for me, was he stopped all those illegal wars. And he wasn't bombing kids. He didn't drone kids like Obama and Biden. Biden bombed and droned 11 civilians, and 8 of them were kids in Afghanistan, just to save face and create that bogus ISIS-K thing, remember? And so Trump didn't do any of that. And so, like, I don't, Trump came in talking a big game, but I don't see him as a big tough guy, right? Like they're making him, he's making it sound like he's intimidating because they had this fake event that Trump acted with the WWE, was completely staged, and like this guy said, "Don't mess with me, don't fuck with me, I'm crazy," right?
Are not going to be, and they obviously have not been at all intimidated by Biden, and they certainly will not be intimidated by Kamala. And you have to really think of that in the context of global security. That if the American president is someone that, like, evil dictators are scared of, that makes a huge difference to the security of the world.
So I had a good relationship with Putin, despite the Russia hoax that lasted for over 2 years. Just a hoax created by Hillary Clinton and Adam Shifty Schiff, some just bad people.
Skifty skiffed.
Just sick people, frankly. I mean, Schiff is a sick person. He's going to end up probably being a senator. It's hard to believe. The whole thing is hard to believe. But, they put our country in danger with that stuff, too. They actually, when they make up stories, and you have to fight your way out of it for a long time. But I know Putin very well. I got along with him very well. He respected me, and it's just one of those things. And
He saw me as a real tough guy.
we would talk a lot about Ukraine. It was the apple of his eye. But I said, don't ever do it. Don't ever do it. You know, I shut down Nord Stream 2. That was the big oil pipeline, the biggest, I think, the biggest pipeline in the world going all over Europe. I shut it down. Biden came, and then they say,
Yeah.
I loved Russia. I was a friend of Putin, and I loved Russia. No, he actually said to me one time, he said, if you're my friend, I'd hate to see you as an enemy. I shut down his pipeline, the biggest pipeline. They were looking at that to
Yeah.
fund, and this pathetic president gets in there, and the first thing he did, one of the early things he did, is he shut down Keystone XL pipeline, which is our pipeline.
Okay, so I'll go back to the intimidation part. Let's go a little bit further here.
That would have employed 48,000 people, pipeline workers, shuts it down. That was, a massive job that Obama refused to allow.
Yeah.
I allowed it in my first week because it was jobs and it moved oil. And by the way, in a much more environmentally friendly way. It's underground. It's not a truck that catches on fire or a train that catches on fire. But think of it. He shut down the
They're having glitches down their end or whatever.
XL pipeline, the Keystone XL pipeline.
Yeah.
He shuts that down, and he approves the Russian pipeline.
Yeah, it doesn't make any
Right?
sense. It's inconsistent. Certainly but I mean, I think it's just worth emphasizing, to listeners the immense importance of whether the United States president is intimidating or not intimidating, and how much that matters to global security, because there's some real tough characters out there, and if they don't think the American president is tough, they will do what they want to do.
I know every one of
and
them.
that puts it puts the
Yeah.
whole world in danger.
Elon, I know every one
It's
of
a
them,
big
and I
deal.
know them well. I know
Yeah.
Putin. I know President Xi. I know Kim Jong-un of North Korea. I know every one of them. And let me tell you,
They're scared of Trump.
people say, oh, this is terrible. He said, I'm not saying anything good or bad. They're at the top of their game. They're tough. They're smart. They're vicious. And they're going to protect their country, whether they love their country. They probably do. It's just a different form of love, but they're going to protect their country. But these
Yeah.
are tough people at the top of their game. And when they see a Kamala or when they see Biden, Sleepy Joe, they can't even believe it. They can't believe this happened. All the stuff that you're seeing now, all the horror that you look at Israel, they're all waiting for an attack from Iran. Iran would not be attacking, believe me. You know, when I was there, and I say it with respect, because I think we would have been good
Again, I mean, well,
with Iran. I don't want to do anything bad to Iran, but they knew not to mess around. Iran was broke because I told China, if you buy from Iran oil, it's all about the oil. That's where the money is. But if you buy oil from Iran, you're not going to do any business with the United States. And I meant it. And they said, we'll
Yeah,
pass.
yeah.
They didn't buy oil. Other countries, likewise.
Sure.
You want to buy, you're not doing business with the United States. And they were at a point where they had no money for Hamas. They had no money for Hezbollah. They had no money for any of these instruments.
you know, what you're doing is what he's talking about here is economic sanctions and getting them to start. When there's economic sanctions, kids starve, right? When Clinton put in economic sanctions on Iraq, 500,000 kids starved, right? 500,000. And remember, his Secretary of State, whatever that woman's name was, I showed you this clip many a time, and she talked about how it was, the right thing to do. It was a tough choice, but it was the right thing to do, right? And then later had to apologize and correct herself. But, Madeleine Albright. And so this is what happens when you do things like that. When you create a situation with Iran, which, again, America fucked Iran over years ago. The CIA did in Operation Ajax, which has been well documented. The CIA has even admitted to it. They got rid of a moderate leader, a progressive leader, in Mossadegh because he wanted to, and CIA was defending British Petroleum, which is a British company, not even an American company, and they were getting 80% of the profits of Iranian oil. And he said, no, I want to split it 50-50. And because of that, they got rid of him, put in the Shah of Iran, who was a nightmare, and now they have the situation with Iran that exists now. America caused that, and Iranians are aware of it, that America manipulated and an evil empired their country. And so we owe them a debt, like we screwed them over collectively, like we did collectively as Americans. And those people, they're individual people. Some of those people I know from, they do the meditation, and sweet people, lovely people, right? And they're not bitter or whatever, like they could hate all Americans because of that, right? Because their country has been wrecked and they live under fear and things like this, right? I mean, they can't even, like, they have to meditate in secret. Like, that's the kind of shit they live with because what America did to them, right? And what Trump's talking about here is economic sanctions, right? Like, what he's doing is economic sanctions by not allowing people to buy Iranian oil because he's a puppet of Israel. Israel owns him, and so do the banks, and so do the, Wall Street. That's his owners and handlers. Israel said, like, he's been the best president ever for Israel because he went after Iran for no reason. Like, they didn't do anything. We've done things to them. We've ruined their country. And Israel's mistreating the people there, obviously the Palestinian people, as he's going to get into more here. So this idea of being intimidated or being intimidating, Trump isn't intimidating. Elon Musk is a goof, and this thing's just a lie, and the whole thing's just goofy. But what Elon Musk is talking about is, like, there's different kinds of intimidating, right? So there is a positive intimidating where somebody is going to tell you the truth. You're scared of somebody because they might tell you the truth about yourself, right? You're scared of somebody because they have reached a level of evolution and consciousness that they're intimidating, right? They're intimidating because when you're in their presence, you realize what a piece of shit you are. Like I'm talking about like a saintly person or someone of a character, a higher developed character that makes you like think about your own self and your own failure and your own weaknesses and things, right? And so there's that level of intimidation. And then there's people who are just physically stronger or have like too much testosterone and are, violent and have a quick trigger finger or whatever it is, right? Vindictive and harsh and crazy in that way, where they might lash out at you. Crazy is another way of being intimidated, where you can't count on them being consistent because they're mentally ill and they're emotional, and they may at any moment, like you're walking on eggshells because you never know when they're going to snap. And that's none of those things. The last one is about you. The first one is about someone being like a saint or spiritually evolved, and they're intimidating because your lies are exposed when you're in their presence. That's on you. But these other people it's undesirable to be that way. People who are irrational, emotional, unstable, violent, and that's what Elon Musk is describing Trump as, right? And that these other people aren't intimidating because the American military and the American history of evil empire shit is intimidating to these countries. They're all intimidated by America because America is unstable. And we have been, saturated with violence in our movies and our video games. And violence is a big part of American culture, military, industrial complex, and the weapons that we have. And the fact that we're willing to go to war over nothing, or provoke wars when there should be none, right? And we're the most warlike people on the planet. And they're all intimidated by the fact that, we have nuclear weapons, and in the wrong hands they could be used in, whatever it is, right? I mean, even in the right hands they could be used. And so, like, there's an intimidation of America based in, or the economic sanctions that Trump just applied. But the thing with the Ukraine had nothing to do with intimidation. The thing with Ukraine was that Biden said, okay, we're going to let Ukraine join NATO, and Putin couldn't let that happen. Because if Ukraine joined NATO, then Ukrainians could attack him at any time. If he retaliated, he would be World War III with America. And that's the sole reason, that's the number one reason that there's a war now with Ukraine and, Russia. And Trump wouldn't have allowed that because he doesn't like NATO, right? Trump was threatening to withdraw from NATO himself, right? And so, like, that wouldn't have happened with him. But Trump is giving Israel a blank slate here, which is, like, equally as fucked up.
Of terror, and it was amazing. In fact, there were articles when I was leaving, which is hard to believe, actually, especially when you look at what's happened to our country. Our country is so bad right now. It's such a different place. We were respected. Think of it. 4 years ago, we were so respected to a point where when I said don't buy oil, they didn't buy oil, but they had no money,
Yeah.
and Israel would have never been attacked. It is zero chance. And again, I said to Vladimir Putin, I said, don't do.
Israel was responsible for their. I mean, this is false flag stuff. Israel controls Hamas, and it's obvious. And these things. Israel wanted this to happen. Israel wanted to go. I mean, Israel has forever wanted to get rid of what's called Palestine, and beyond that, like what I've showed you, the Greater Israel. I talk about this all the time. This war benefits Israel in every possible way, in terms of their goals and their agenda, and benefits Palestinians not at all. Right? The attack opened the door for Israel to do what it's doing, and anyone with half a brain would know that, right?
Do it. You can't do it, Vladimir. You do it, it's going to be a bad day. You cannot do it. And I told him things that what I do, and he said, no way. And I said, way. And it's the last time we ever had the conversation.
This is the moment I wanted. And I said, no way. And he said, no way. And I said, way. Like, it's like a child, right? This is a child talking about a conversation he had when he was a child.
To Vladimir Putin, I say, don't do it. You can't do it, Vladimir. You do it, it's going to be a bad day. You cannot do it. And I told him things that what I do, and he said, no way. And I said, way. And it's the last time we ever had the conversation. He would never have done. I got along well with him. I hope to get along well with him again. Getting along well with them is a good thing, not a bad thing. I got along well with
Yeah.
Kim Jong Un. When I met with President Obama just before entering, it's a sort of a ritual, and I
It's
sat
a ritual.
down with him and we talked. It was supposed to be for a very short period of time. It turned out to be a long period of time. I said, "What's the biggest problem?" He said, "North Korea." I had that problem worked out very quickly. It was nasty at the beginning with Rocket Man and all the different things,
Yeah.
but all of a sudden I got a
Those,
call.
those were some epic tweets, by the way.
Yeah, they
Those
were no,
like
they were
absolutely...
epic. Everything he said that he has a red button on his desk. I said, I have a red button on my desk too, but my red button is much bigger, and my red button works. And then I called him Little
Yeah.
Rocket Man of Little Rocket Man. Anyway, here's the bottom line.
Those are epic tweets. But it's called X now, bro.
And all of a sudden I got a call from him, and they said they want to meet. They want to meet me, and we met.
Yeah.
As you remember, we met in Singapore. We met also in Vietnam, and I got along with them great. We were
Yeah.
in no danger.
It-
But
yeah.
President Obama,
It's because they
thought we were going
respond-
to end up in
yeah.
a war, a nuclear war with him. And let me tell you, he's
Yeah,
got a
it's
lot
not
of
true.
nuclear stuff
Yeah,
too.
exactly.
He's got plenty of nuclear.
He's got plenty of nuclear. That guy's got nuclear all over. This guy's a child, right? Like, no person in the right mind would hand this guy any real power. The people controlling the system, the so-called deep state. Why in the world would you give this guy power, right? He's a freaking moron. Like, he's emotional and petty and, big ego, unstable. Like, it just, everything's about him. He doesn't, everything's short-sighted and, what benefits him. He's criminal and, a liar and a flim-flam man. No one in the right mind would give this guy power, right? Or any of these presidents. Like, no one would give them power. Allow them to just do whatever they thought. Just the limited power of the presidency they wouldn't give them. Like, that's, you got to understand it. The people running the world have, these things are negotiated, and not that they're good people or smart people, but, they're not, there's a collective, and it's just not some random fuck who's like delusional and, narcissistic. They're never going to hand Kamala the keys to the kingdom, right? So whoever they elect, it's stupid to vote because these guys are just, no one's going to,
Can do plenty of damage. So
Yes, I mean it's because people like Kim Jong Un, they respond to strength, not weakness.
well,
And
he
and
and I got
if
he
you
and I
project
had a good
strength,
relationship.
you're
Remember,
yeah.
I met him and we walked onto his land. Nobody ever walked onto his land before. I walked onto. I wouldn't say.
Yeah,
Let's
that
bring
was
up
cool.
Secret Service again. I wouldn't say they were thrilled when I did that. I walked onto his land, and it was an amazing period. But we were not in danger with him because of me. I always
Yeah.
say
people is protecting you guys from North Korea. And we see immediately when Trump left, North Korea has been, like, what are you talking about?
that we have enemies on the outside and we have enemies on the inside. We have some really bad people in our government and people that are and controlling of the people. I mean, I'd mention names, but I really don't want to give them the credit. But we have some really bad, and I say they're more dangerous than Russia and China. If you have a smart president, a president that gets it, we are not in danger from those countries because they need us and they need our help. I mean, we forced Obama, if you think about it, Obama and Biden and Bush to a certain extent, in all fairness, forced Russia and China together. And if you're a history student, the first thing you learn is you cannot let Russia and China align. But then they also got, if you take a look, Iran, and they have North Korea. That's, they call it the axis of evil. In the old days, you had the axis of evil. Here we have a modern day axis of evil. These
All right, so let's let him finish up here.
are powerful countries, very heavy nuclear, which is the biggest threat.
Yeah.
The biggest threat is not global warming, where the ocean's going to rise 1/8 of an inch over the next 400 years. And you'll have more oceanfront property, right? The biggest threat
Yeah, that's not. You mean less land?
is not that. The biggest threat is nuclear warming, because we have 5 countries now that have significant nuclear power, and we have to not allow anything to happen with stupid people like Biden. Biden did something with Russia. There was no chance of him ever going in. And when I left, and then
All right, so you get this idea here. I want to wrap this up. So Elon Musk stroking Trump's ego and supporting him. Elon Musk didn't like Trump at first, just like J.D. Vance and just like Tucker Carlson. But they've all come together in this weird sort of, patriotic, fake patriotic circle jerk. But he said one of the biggest reasons he was supporting Trump was his badass moment when he was pumping his fist. All these guys said that, right? And it's fake. Like, it's totally fake. Like, it is. I mean, it's not badass when the guy isn't really hurt. And then when you see the wound that he had, the non-existent wound and the bandage he put on it, and how much big deal they made about it, and how much they're still using it as a weapon against his voters and people to inspire them that Trump is some sort of a badass. And they're, the whole badass thing comes from this thing that Trump's doing, right? In terms of his, Trump has some negotiation skills in screwing other people out of deals and things. He has the book he wrote, The Art of the Deal, and that's a big thing I used to talk about in terms of The Apprentice. But he's a moron. Like, anybody who praises Trump, whether it be Putin or Beatty from Israel or any of these leaders, Trump will do anything for him, right? Like, he'll give them whatever because he just wants people to love him. He's just weird in a way that's totally unhealthy. I mean, that's what all this is about, like Trump love, right? And so, I mean, this whole thing is just ridiculous. And there's no way, like I said, that any of these dopes could ever really be president. We're so degraded in terms of our political system. There isn't a candidate out there that they're going to hand the keys to the kingdom. It's so owned and so controlled now, and there's so many handlers and players involved, and there's negotiations that happen on these, power brokers level, whether it be religious power or money power, the global power, and these decisions that are made in the, intelligence community, and all these players, again, these negotiations, and the people that handle the president tell him what to do. Or they just force him through the media like they did with COVID. They put so much pressure on him through the media and everywhere else that Trump put on a mask. He closed down the economy and he rolled out Operation Warp Speed, and they totally fucked him by doing that. Then they used that all against him, and they whined like a little bitch, right? And he said that, that thing about like pull that tweet back up here. And he said this thing about, here's the tweet here. If somebody cheated in the election, which the Democrats did, why wouldn't the election be immediately overturned? How can a country be run like this, right? And that sums Trump up. And so if you think that guy's going to save you when he couldn't save himself, and, any time they could have convicted him, right? But they seem to want him again. And if he loses, then what are they going to do? Like, who are they going to focus on? Trump is their biggest asset right now. But either way, in 4 years, if they elect him, then he's going to be gone. And then what are they going to do? What's the next act after Trump? They don't really have one. And so they need him to run the country into the ground. He's a patsy, just like that guy up on the roof, right? Trump is their patsy. And, like the whole thing that they're running here and trying to make him sound like he's some big tough guy and he's like competent leader. And he clearly isn't. Okay, so it's Thursday, August 15th. This is the end of the video. I'm going to post this voiceover again some other time because it's, an essential point that I probably forget to say, as frequently as I should, right? But, after watching these two clowns, and when you think about the model of success that we have in this climate, this global climate, where you're an exalted figure, where you're a celebrity, you're a spiritual leader, you're a politician or a professional athlete or a multi-billionaire or something like this, right? Where you're a real successful person, business-wise, celebrity, and both these guys are successful business people, and that's what Trump and Elon Musk are, and they're crossover successful business people. There's business people who are successful businessmen who are anonymous, right? And then there's the Mark Cubans and the Donald Trumps and the Jeff Bezoses and, the Bill Gates of the world, right? Who are successful business people, but then become social media figures or, famous people or whatever it is, right? And you have these people who are successful. And then, of course, people like the royal family, which is another example of this, right? But what this model is predicated on is that these people are given privileges. Of course, they have wealth and things like this, and treatment that is better than what everyone else gets, right? And so they get privileged treatment. All the people who have privileged treatment in this world, right? There's, a number of people who have privileged treatment, but the majority of people don't, right? And the majority of people suffer dead-end jobs, slave jobs, whatever, wage slave jobs, poverty and depression and hopelessness and all these, things that they suffer from. I mean, that's the majority of people. Like most people think the majority of people are like your neighbors. You live in a suburb somewhere. You live in a, nice area in a city or whatever. And you think about people being, middle class, upper middle class, lower middle class, people that right? But the majority of people in the world are ego-crushingly poor. I don't like to say soul-crushing, but ego-crushingly poor, right? They're just depressed and, they're malnourished. Their brains don't develop from lack of protein at a young age. And they're, just living what most of us would consider hellish existences. People who are privileged, all of us who are, living in some sort of, modern day situation, even if we're not, even if we can't pay our bills, even if we're struggling financially, we're so much better off than these other people, at least on a material level, right? And so it's the suffering of many for the pleasures of the few. And that's this model of our existence here, that people are suffering so that you can have a better lifestyle. And not just people, animals and environments that are being, arred, right, are being, destroyed and just harvested in ways that is unnatural and, just unethical and really a crime against God, right? And so the harvesting of resources, so, people who are miserable, entitled whiners can indulge in a lifestyle that they don't even enjoy. And so that's the model of our existence, right? And in that existence, America is the evil empire. America as a country, we were, living good lifestyles because of the suffering of the world, right? The suffering of other countries that, we're eating their food and we're using their resources. You look at the products we get, and you're getting things cheaply from China and Indonesia and, any number of countries, right? You look at the back of you look at the label of where your clothes are made or where your products are made. And these people who are suffering immense poverty, working 16-hour days,
and they are purposely keeping their economy, their dollar, like China's dollar, is being devalued, so that they can pay their laborers next to nothing compared to what Americans get paid, and so that they can have a thriving export business, right? And so, understanding that, like all of this bullshit that you're hearing from these political candidates, and all the bullshit you hear about America and the whole USA, and all the bullshit you hear about all of it, is that we're indulging and we're living. People talking about white privilege, this privilege, that privilege. What that means is that we're all living better material lives, better material existence because of the suffering of other people and trees and plants, and environment, and all these things, right? And so this is based in the royal model. Of course, people who are exalted ones, saints, and religious leaders also get this kind of treatment. Uh, but they're propped up and put on a pedestal. These people, these robber baron kings and empire and emperors, and they are, people are bowing before them, kissing their ring. Why? Because they were born with some, a bloodline and these things, and they're considered better than other people. And all these people are, funneling money into these, not just money and resources, but also service and fealty, and all these ways of, bowing before these demonic people, right? And America is the evil empire. Like right now, we're the strongest military, we have the best economy, and we have the most power in this way. And everything that we do is to prop up our dying economy for a bunch of miserable fucks who are not enjoying their lives, right? Like the richer the people are, the less, the more whining they are, the more complaining, the more entitled they are. And this is, all the people in America to some extent don't appreciate what we have, don't appreciate the lifestyle we have, and don't really care about the suffering it's causing to other people, right? You hear that your iPhone's made in these sweatshops, and you're like, oh, that's too bad. you know, but I don't really want to switch my phone. Come on, I'm kind of used to this phone. And then you buy a Galaxy, and it's the same thing. So, this is our country. And so there's no moral high ground. There's no like we're the good guys, we're saving people, and we're the heroes, like all this shit that people believe, right? About our military or about all everything that we do is to keep ourselves in the position we are, in the lifestyle that we have, and that's we have people doing evil shit on our behalf, the CIA and all these various people out there. They're doing bad things to keep the American system and the world economy going. It's the haves indulging on the resources of the have-nots, right? And keeping the haves in their lifestyle is what this is all about. The problem is, it is like in a sense too big to fail. We've pushed all our chips on the table on this world global economy, not just the haves, but the have-nots, everybody, and we're all tied together. And if the haves stop having, the have-nots who are barely surviving starve to death. And it's like kind of a sick game where you can't even put an end to this whole thing and make it equitable or something like this, because of the way the economy is structured and the way the global economy is structured, that as soon as it breaks down, the poorest of the poor suffer even more, right? And so we can do nothing about it but wait till it collapses and then deal. We all have to deal then, right? We all have to figure it out when the system collapses, and I don't know what that'll look like, a total collapse or what it is, but we don't have a backup plan, and we've lost all skills that don't relate to this system. And so we're all dependent on the system for one thing or another, right? And we don't even know what it'd be like to be without electricity or the internet, forever. Like it just stopped working. And what would we do without money, without stores or grocery stores, without any of these things? What would people do? And panic was, panic was the first thing. But you'd go through like the stages of grief, and very few people would get to a place of acceptance or gratitude. And, I've explained this in so many different videos. But when you understand it from that perspective, then all this bullshit, this Trump thing and the, Kamala Harris thing and the, the voting and the whole media and the sports and all the distraction and all the
takes and all the divisions that people have and their point of view. Are you guys the bad ones? No, we're the good ones. You're the bad ones. No, we're the bad ones. We're the good ones. You're the bad ones. Right? All this stuff. Like it's just the way people, the pettiness of it. No, the left is the good ones. No, the right is the good ones, or whatever. All this stuff. None of it really matters because they're not going to tell you the truth. Is that we're all bad in the sense that we're all supporting a system and living lives that goes against the divine order of things, goes against our soul's plan, goes against the will of God. And it's unnatural to whatever extent. Yeah, and there's some people are worse than others, but that doesn't make any difference, right? Because we're all contributing to the problem. And there's no solution. Like there is one solution where you take everything that you get from God. Like you stop thinking about coming from the system, you stop thinking about you deserving it or not. You stop thinking about any of these, psychological rationalizations you have for justifying your place in the world, right? And you just say, this is what my soul needs to move forward in, my path. And whatever I have, whatever I don't have, whatever, is there for me in material life, whatever's, the good, bad, and the ugly, the good things, the joys, the miseries, they're all here coming from God. And it's not coming from the beast or the system. And then whatever God gives me is what I need, and I'll just accept it, whatever that may be. And it's a hard thing to do when things go south, right? But at least for now, like you can do that with the positive things and stop thinking about them coming from the system or coming from some sense of deserving or whatever. You just have your your lifestyle, you have your place in the world, and you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. I mean, you find that you connect to your soul and you figure out what you're supposed to be doing. And then you, from that place, I talk about the Gratefullness meditation, doing the Sajmark system. It helps people do that. You have to connect with your soul and God and have a relationship with the divinity within you. And then you can start making decisions that are based in your soul's path and what you're supposed to be doing here. Because we all have a purpose. We all have a role to play. And if you figure out what that role is, with this idea on being a servant to God, then you've pretty much solved your personal problem. And the whole system is the whole system. That'll take care of itself. But you solve your personal problem, right? You do get what God wants you to do, what your soul wants you to do. Because it always comes down to service. Because these selfish, narcissistic, sociopathic motherfuckers like Kamala Harris and Donald Trump and Elon Musk and all these people in the media who are self-promoting and are about their position and trying to get more for themselves. And, they are, again, sponging off the have-nots and somehow getting the have-nots to hand over their money. Like you have people who are, struggling financially and emotionally and psychologically and spiritually, and they're desperate, and they hand in their money over this alleged billionaire Donald Trump, and thinking that he's going to somehow stop their miserable existence from being miserable and make it, so that they are feeling, that they're not in this position they're in, but they're just all taking. Their people are taking. You're a have-not, and they have no, like you. If you want to become a have, you have to cross the line and do whatever you have to do to become a have. No one's going to make you into a have, right? So, and you're probably happier being a have-not, because the haves in general, even though they have the better lifestyle, are miserable, selfish people, right? But all these people are takers, and they don't serve anything. They don't really believe in God, and they certainly don't serve God. Master Charji, the third master of the Sajmark system, said, rich people don't pray. Because he's talking about the ultra-wealthy people. Because if they start praying, God would be like, well, you can help people, right? You could distribute your wealth in a way and prop up your brothers and sisters. And so if they, let their guard down, connect to God, and they feel, their conscience and their, they're knowing that they're hoarding wealth that they're not even enjoying, and they could make the world a better place by sharing some of it, right? By doing good things, not in this, being a philanthropist that they, Bill Gates or somebody like that, fake stuff where they still use it as a way to make money. But, what I'm saying here is all these people who are sociopathic and self-centered and egotistical people, and they're held up and they're talking about, Joe Biden has been serving Americans for 50 years, right? Whatever the crap that they sell you, right?
They're not serving Americans. They serve themselves, right? But real saints, real spiritual people, they don't do it publicly. They're not serving people, good people who are, going out and doing good things for other people, right? Maybe they don't even believe in God, but they want to, they have something to offer and they're trying to help other people up and lift other people up, right? And that's the future. And when you can do that, when you can be of service to God, whatever your capacity, and you just have to say to God, what can I do to serve you? What can, again, I mean, having a clear channel and not being crazy as because lots of people hear voices that are just their egos or, their distorted personalities. I mean, first you have to become somebody who's balanced and you're not like heavily medicated and self-medicating and, you have a distorted view of reality. I mean, that's the cleaning process in the Sajma gratefulness meditation that we do. Having some sort of a clean consciousness so that you can connect with God and the divinity within you, having a clean heart and being able to connect to your heart and feel the love in your heart and God's love and use that as a like sort of beacon to guide you through your life, right? And so that's, there's the solution. I mean, in terms of, there's no solution to the system, but there's a solution to your personal problem. And these people who are egotistical monsters and they just want more and more, I talked about Madonna, wanting more and more, but you feed me, right? And they're just sucking off the energy of the crowd and the mob and Donald Trump. Look how much they love me, these things. Because they're bankrupt inside, and these people are the worst example, but they're held up as exalted ones. And, people are buying into this stuff. When it's, they themselves that have to start becoming better people and being somebody who's contributing. Like there's very few people who are taking the world in the right direction, making the world a better place. If you can make the world a better place, then your place is set because you're a contributor, right? You're not going to be thrown away. You're somebody who can help make this place better. I mean, legitimately better, right? And if you can do that, then, you don't have to worry about it. Like you can just say, all right, whatever happens to the system, the economy, everything, collapses. There's still a place for me because I'm, I have the ability to give and give back and help, take something bad and make it better. And, with that spirit, I'll wrap this one up here, but I'll play this audio again at the beginning of some video in the future. Hopefully I'll remember to do that. Only spirituality will save this MF world. It's Paramano, definitely pointing for the apocalypse. And the ascension, everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.